Chapter 91 Tree of Runes and Rituals. Year 119. During the past few years, I've been studying runes and formations. It's been something on my mind since I saw those mages do it, and with the hero's financial resources, I have a lot to read and study. Of course, I can't read. So, the task is left to some poor Valtrian Order magic student, whose job is to come to the Valley of the Unrodden, and read the book out loud. Kind of like Audible, but only a lot more boring because the subject matter is runic formations, magical theory and stuff like that. This of course served multiple functions. It's a means of education for these students. Reading out loud is a good way of learning and committing to memory. 2. It helped me. 3. I get to have a sense of how these young children are. After all, their behavior is quite clear when they are asked to read a book alone in a strange and scary place. I didn't get a skill, sadly. But that's fine. I developed an understanding of the magical formations, and I began experimenting on them. Mainly, in some corner of my growing domain that wasn't inhabited. I had a few things I wanted to do, one of which is to use formations as a source of mana on a large scale. Instead of using mana, create formations that do the reverse of generating mana, like some kind of mana gathering facility. There are smaller scale variants, but I was quite inspired by the former hero, Astra's ability to apparently channel mana from various sources to create a super hex bomb. No matter how he did it. Mirai has been particularly cooperative, and she was very amused with the children reading books in the often uninhabited valley. Tree spirits sure have strange ways of doing things. She helped with the mana gathering formations. I had the impression trees are able to do this quite naturally. As in, trees gather mana naturally, do they not? Yes. Mirai, after the earlier set of outburst, stabilized. I suspect it's the effects of her hero class, now restored. It suppressed those emotions. But it's a slow process, and I am hoping to speed it up. Why? Why not? A massive defensive array requires mana. A lot of it. It took many iterations, but eventually we succeeded in producing an array of runes and structures able to produce more mana than it uses. It had to be big, too, so it wasn't something you could hide. But that meant I could channel more of this mana to fight off the demonic energy, and expand even more. Gerard returned in the later half of the year with a fragment. The third piece that was given away. I scanned it, and sadly, it was still an incomplete image. Demons. Dragons. Combat. A lot of combat. Earth cracked, and so did the skies. It is still incomplete. There are pieces out there. But how do we find it? Grand Mind Tree has blocked attempted influence. Again. The frozen tree was very willing to share. Gerard explained. It told me that he would like to meet you someday. Likewise. A frozen tree spirit. That's extremely fascinating. This frozen tree lived in a frozen lake in the far north, in an uninhabited island that's almost completely frozen over. Home to ice giants, monsters and all that, the frozen tree is the overlord of that island, and has kept the island free of demons for millennia. I wonder what other tree spirits think of this entire situation. Surely they don't just accept it like lilies. Or they all do, because that's how trees are. Nature is what it is, and they just accept it. Is going against the rules of the world a thing that trees don't do? Domain and Grand Mind Tree has blocked attempted divine action. I take that as a yes. It seemed that trees really do not attempt to break the cycle, even if they are long-lived and can see things with the benefit of history. Surely, this systematic, demonic destruction is not acceptable, since it's way more than just regular constructive destruction. And yet they do nothing. Why? I don't get it. Gods. Has to be the gods. Meddling gods. You've gained a level. You are now level 157. Skill. Natural mana overwhelming upgraded. Why is the same skill getting upgraded over and over again? And I still don't get why I gain a level from it. The constant expansion of my territory and also the influx of more refugees means the population has increased significantly. Outside of my research, I spend more time, together with Jasmine, to watch over the multiple towns and cities that have popped up. It's a very big area, and for the most part, Kavio and the new Council of Representatives all deal with me directly. The focus is on the next Demon King. Our preparations, readying ourselves for the coming wars. The heroes also worked on making more anti-demon weapons. More armors and more sets. Weapons. Yay. Over the years I've managed to equip a 200-strong group with a full set of anti-demon armor, and I hope to grow this force to 500 strong. Of this group, about 50 are now at least level 40. Once they hit level 60 to 70, they should be able to handle a demon walker without my assistance. They gained this level by hunting naturally spawning monsters, and made regular trips into the Rotted Lands to fight the hybrid spawns. In a world where the Rotted Lands is like a large dungeon, the level of the residents should be high. Else, it's jarring. Even with protection like my army of beetles. But then, if their levels go up, that makes them more dangerous to me, isn't it? I am not too worried about high-level merchants or craftsmen, but then, warriors, I have to get them on my side. Anyway, we regularly deployed soldiers and recruits into the Rotted Lands to fight monsters. That way, the soldiers and recruits who work for me gain levels, and prepare for the real demonic attacks. Is this what rulers do? I mean, I didn't really actively do it, but it must be trying to do this whole play each faction against each other shtick. Balancing levels so that all the factions never get too powerful and they continue to obey me. Too fucking time consuming. I mean, I was on this train of thought as news of civil war broke out in Harris' now fractured kingdom. I mean, the man is still alive and already they are fighting. Children, fighting each other. It must suck to be a father and watch your children fight. Suppose it's like a typical family drama where a wealthy tycoon passed away and the kids squabble over the riches. In fact, it absolutely drove him into depression of some kind. Well, I am not sure whether it's actually depression, but it made him feel very, very sad. So much so that Mireille was the one comforting him. What should I do? Harris was sad. Already, some of his sons and daughters came to talk to him, and asked him to stop it. But he gave away his rights to those lands, and some of his more ambitious children are taking the chance to do something. Stop him, father. A boy said to Harris. He's attacking one of us. But truth was, everyone was provoking each other, and Harris had his own network of informants that seemed to suggest none of his children were entirely innocent. If he wanted to lay down the law, he would have to do it to everyone. And yet he is but one person. Even those who served him, he is not surprised if they are already taking sides in the conflict. You can do two things. Mireille said to a sad Harris. Stop it, and enter into a loop of constantly interfering. And eventually when you do die, they will still continue the fight that they've postponed. Or do nothing. They have land and territory now, and let them fight each other over it. Let them prove themselves by blood and war. That's so cruel. It's always been this way. Territorial disputes are as old as nations themselves, and the right to rule is one protected by might and magic, not by name or heritage. Harris regretted breaking his country up then. He knew he would just be kicking the can down the road until the day they die and they'd fight it out anyway. But at least he wouldn't be alive to see it. So, as much as he knew it was a stupid thing to do, he started left frequently to stop the fighting with his summoned army. There was no way he could let it continue, even if it did lead to a constant vicious cycle. A cruel fate. Mireille said as much as she watched her friend feel like shit. You know, that's partly why I didn't want to have children. After I discovered what happened to so many heroes and their families, I just feel really sad. I don't think I could ever watch my children drift apart and start doing that. Conflict is eternal. But perhaps, so is reconciliation. I used more and more runes and formations to gather more mana, and added runic formations to the Valley of the Unrodden. Mana means territory, and I am pretty damned good with using mana to push back against the demons. More mana, more runes, more mana. Eventually, I made a formation large enough to trigger a notification that I wasn't quite expecting. Soul Forge. Yellow unlocked. Artificial Souls level cap increased to level 60. All artificial souls now have yellow option unlocked. Class, skill, experience seed merging unlocked. Ability to merge souls and classes, and multiple class seeds and experience seeds together. Class, skill, experience seed upgrade unlocked. Able to upgrade classes, skills and experience seeds to superior forms. Ooh, looks like I am one step further, and closer, to make myself an army of super elites. Yellow Soul Forge from just using a massive array and formation to gather mana. Who would have thought of that? That meant Soul Forges actually just require different types or origin of mana, not necessarily unique or special magical leylines. But, wait, if I get enough star mana, could I have Soul Forge? Star. I mean, theoretically possible, perhaps. What overpowered ability would I have? Or what about demonic mana? Could enough demonic mana power some kind of Soul Forge too? So, I began to explore both aspects of these mana, experimenting more on the hybrid demonic trees. I hoped to at least somehow unlock a better understanding of the demon's mana, even if it didn't lead to a soul forge. At the same time, I started the whole class seed upgrade and merging process. Essentially, class seeds are upgraded when one adds essence, mana and materials. Combining them increases their strength and power, and fusing multiple class seeds creates special ones. It's a bit like crossbreeding, splicing and grafting different trees together to create something different at the end. I began rather conservatively, like fusing multiple Ranger and Druid class seeds together, which formed the Mountain Druid class. Or multiple Druid classes were fused together and then obtained the Great Druid class. The ratio is like 10 normal classes to form one single better class. And I kept at it. I have a lot of class seeds and essences accumulated over the years, and I've finally found a place to fuse them all. 20 Knight classes made one single, Grand Knight class, and 10 Warrior and Soldiers made a Warmaster. It's honestly extremely enjoyable, and I felt like a cook when I fused all the different classes together. Adding essences to it also did some strange things. Iron and mineral essences fused to a Knight eventually created a Steel Knight class. But there is a limitation. These evolved classes, not all can be further fused. Not all, and I am still trying to find what can be fused. Eventually, one of the few twice evolved classes I discovered was 30 Great Druid classes fused into a single Lord of the Forest class. And 50 Grand Knight classes fused into a Knight Master. With it, I was eager to test it out. So, I selected one young promising 13-year-old Valthorn. His name was Ferris, and he's been living in one of the outer sections of the Freshlands, before he was recruited to join the Valthorns 3 years ago. He's been training with Yvonne for a while, and in 3 years he's already a level 30 Druid. A regular Druid class. I gave a Great Druid class seed to Yvonne. You want to give this to him? Yes. Are you sure? Why not? I mean, this is a rare class, right? Yvonne didn't know I unlocked the class fusion ability. Let's keep it that way. Yes, I believe it is time I stop hoarding these things and grant them. So Yvonne did in fact, give it to Ferris. There was a small ceremony, something like a small award ceremony in school where the principal would then give out certificates, only, he received a small seed. This, young Ferris, is a gift from Eon himself. A fruit which will grant you the class Great Druid. Everyone in the room of course clapped. Ferris didn't waste much time and chomped down the fruit. I observed him that entire day, and I watched his soul change slightly, as the new class merged with his own. After one night's sleep, he found himself with increased mastery over his druidic abilities. Domain and Grand Mind Tree blocked passive influence from a Great Druid. I suppose I should be more careful with giving out classes relating to control over trees. I think that was a passive. Ferris and Jura came to me for an audience the next day. He was still a young boy in the end, even though he does have a good class. Children. So young. Eon, I bring the one that you've granted the seed. Greetings, Ferris. I spoke mentally, and already I could sense some pressure pushing back. Domain and Grand Mind Tree blocked passive influence. I believe you may be unknowingly using some passive abilities, young Ferris. Ferris flustered and he seemingly nodded. I am sorry. Then I felt the pressure lift. Do druids have these abilities all these while? Is this how they attempt to control trees? He is still but a young child. Good. How do you like your reward? It's quite amazing. Eon. Upgrading my class to a Great Druid at my age is unheard of anywhere in the world. All my skills are stronger now. Good. It is a gift, and a reward, and with it, responsibility and expectation, that you will do more and better for us. Our land remains heavily damaged, and we need people like you to help heal it. Ferris nodded. He was very agreeable and impressionable. At that moment, I wonder whether I've made a mistake in giving him such powers, the same way the gods gave their powers to young teenagers. One of the foolish things about people is that, well, they seem to forget that trees in the forests have eyes. So, Jasmine and my artificial souls alerted me to the presence of some cultists. It's common. A land newly reclaimed and filled with people, where law enforcement is still not yet secure, and leaders still vying for power and position among themselves, some will inevitably turn to magic, and occasionally, blood magic. So, in the depth of the unnamed woods, a group of 35 men and women were gathered. One of them was an old noble from the nearby city, who migrated to the Freshlands and settled there. They had with them about 15 slaves. The slaves all looked extremely afraid. Should we save the slaves, master? Jasmine asked. There were beetles and Spiders who could easily intercept. Wait, I wanted to see this for a long time now. Blood magic. I am sorry, slaves, but I believe the benefit I gain from learning how blood magic works will allow me to save more lives in the future. 30 men formed a circle, and with a quick cut, one of the slaves were killed. His body splattered in the middle of a strange formation. They chanted, and I could see the soul very clearly, torn apart by the blood magic. They did so repeatedly, with all the slaves. I watched, with all my sensors, magical and not. Blood magic being executed right before my eyes. I saw their magic rip the soul out of the slaves, and fused them together. Oh wow. It really is a kind of soul fusion. But it's incomplete. I saw the core of their souls break free and the remnant, the outer souls of the slaves stitched together by their rough blood magic. Incomplete. Irregular and messy. But it is strong. Just like how my artificial souls are without a soul core. From this alone I could easily see that their blood magic is essentially using the outer part of the souls, and fused together into this mess. After a chant or so, the blood magic compressed the tangled fused souls into a small reddish drop on a small plate. The noble took it, and he drank it. Instantly I saw his body's energy levels spike up. This was quite like using blood magic to strengthen himself, and his features quickly turned younger. Ah, youth. Interesting. The ritual was done. I think I have an idea why the hex can be reversed gradually via those negative emotions. No more reason to leave them alive. Most of them. Well, capture the 2 chief ritual masters alive. There were 2 of them that led the ritual, and well, I have plans for some good old interrogation. An army of beetles and spiders descended on them. The noble was strong, his strength amplified by the blood magic. So, it still took me a few hits of serpentine root strike, and an army of beetles quickly slaughtered the rest of them. Hex. It's essentially an unstable fusion of the outer souls, which is why it leaked so much negative energy. And, because this negative energy is contagious, it caused others close to it to also suffer hex poisoning. Walking into a field of hex is like being infected with depression that killed you from within. A rot in the soul, caused by exposure to unstable fusion of soul fragments. Chapter 92 Tree of Classes. Year 120. I gave away a Grand Knight class to a promising young student. She was fit, but with the Grand Knight class, she became fit and unnaturally strong. She had a skill that strengthened all the armor that she wore, and she turned into quite a monster to fight. These upgraded classes, Eon, how did you get them? Yvonne was extremely curious. At the same level, an upgraded class is at least 30% stronger. Perhaps this was the comparison between a lord and a king, or a king and an emperor. I collected them. Which is partly true. Through all the souls of the dead, I've been accumulating so much class seeds that I've lost track of all of them. I've also been growing class tree plants, that produces more class seeds of the rarer classes, like Dark Knight. I mean, would 30 Dark Knights give me a Dark Paladin? You know, this news spreads out, many are going to come calling. Fruits that are able to grant an upgraded class are unheard of in the world. Even kings may grant royal variants, but those are nothing like true upgraded classes. And, well, theft, for one. Well, need to prepare for that, as there will be thieves who want to steal your stockpile of upgraded class seeds. Let them try. It's all inside me. How would they steal? Perhaps these thieves have some kind of skill, then. Wait, that does sound possible. A thief with a skill able to take from one's presumed safe pockets sounds exactly like what a high-tier thief should have. Jasmine, can you increase your surveillance for thieves? Master, we've located many thieves. Already. Oh, it has been a year since I gave away my Great Druid class. Most are petty criminals, but some appear highly skilled. Thieves. Should I just kill them? Dash. Meanwhile, the captured blood ritualists were forced to do my bidding. Mainly, to conduct more blood rituals, using criminals that are on death row. I had to learn a bit more about blood magic. There's some fundamental similarities between my soul forge and blood magic, and I intended to learn more of it. The blood ritualists cooperated, and used the criminals to cast all sorts of blood rituals. Strengthening rituals, summoning rituals. Of course, after 50-ish rituals, they leveled up, and I think they were close to level 60. Then they got overconfident and started to attack me with the summoned creatures. Each ritual made them stronger, but I too, gained a deeper understanding of blood magic. I have a large army, and now, more elites. I deployed my new Grand Knight and Great Druid together with an army of beetles. The 2 ritualists didn't stand much of a chance. They honestly should have used blood magic to cast some kind of warped teleportation, but perhaps that had too much risk. Blood magic is inherently unstable, its power derived from the stitching of the outer souls together in accordance with ancient writings. Those writings guide the ritualists, bind the fragments of the soul together into a shape, and each shape then creates a specific effect. Some of these shapes are actually benign, and hence they empower their hosts. Still, they are inherently unstable soul fragments, so over time they decay and they create problems for the host. It's like cancer. Really. The two overconfident ritualists were captured again. This time, their punishment was death, and I gave them a punishment that I gave a long time ago. Death by deconstruction in a biolab. I received blood mage class seeds. I wonder whether I could somehow get hero class seeds. Mirai. Yes, Eon. Would you ever be willing to give away your hero class? I asked her one day as she rested in one of the courtyards of Freshka. She had slowly dismantled her business, and sold them to various merchants eager to take over her clothing chain. Yes. She had a headache after she said it. The hero class is pretty much the god's remote control button. It's a Trojan horse in our body. It was quite predictable, and to some extent, Mirai got better at figuring out what triggers the headache. It was always something about heroes and gods. She took about a while to collect herself, and she continued. I mean, I would give it away, but I can't. The system doesn't let me do it. I just tried to do it just now. Really. Yet it allows you to trade your hero levels for other levels. Yeah, I could theoretically trade away all my hero levels for something else, and then give you all those levels, but it sounds like you are interested in the hero class itself, Eon. Well, that's right. I mean, the hero class itself is what's incredibly fascinating. Like, is there a way I can trace it backwards to the source, i.e., the gods? Do the gods actually have a physical location in this world? Like, there's a magical heaven somewhere, where they gaze on this world. Perhaps they are like players, looking at us through the screen. Have you not considered it, giving away all your hero levels so that you can remove their influence? I did think about it. But I didn't do it because I wanted to still help Harris and Gerard. I doubt the gods would just let all three of us trade all our hero classes away. Pretty sure there's like a limit or something. Makes sense that the gods would put a failsafe like that. They already went ahead to actively mind control and mind wipe these heroes, why wouldn't they put restrictions? Dash. Tending to flowers, great druid. The young lady said. She was in full armor, had two large swords on each side, and a long wooden anti-demon spear at the back. Edna, the Grand Knight, and she's only 16. As I am often compelled to do, yes. Has Eon summoned you recently? No, why? Well, I have had offers from nearby kingdoms to defect to serve them. Ferris paused. If it's a good offer, it is worth considering. Though the term defection is a bit too strong. Oh, Edna sat on a rock in the flower garden. Explain. I believe Eon may be open to us acting as his mercenaries. Mercenaries. Edna frowned. That's quite against the very nature of my class as a Grand Knight. I spoke to some observers, Principal Yvonne and Master Jura, and they agreed that Eon may be willing to consider stationing us in those other kingdoms. Willing to consider doesn't mean he will. Eon's willingness, of course, has a price. A good enough reward, he would definitely consider it. I believe if the kingdoms may offer something rare and unique from the ancient pasts, Eon may well be swayed into it. At least, Principal Yvonne strongly thinks so. I highly doubt he is willing to give any of us away. Not give. Stationed. We are still loyal to him, and we act as his agents. Our services to those other kingdoms are similar to those of an adventurer. We would obviously abstain if those conflicts meant we would end up fighting each other. So you have been similarly approached. Edna smirked. Of course. Ferris said. When the kingdoms, or even the Houghton Council first gave me the offers, I quickly notified Valthorn leadership. Master Juris' advice then was to ignore it, as if these kingdoms truly are desperate, they would offer far greater rewards than what they offered now. Edna shook her head. That really makes it sound like mercenarial. I wouldn't do so. Ferris turned to laugh. If so, it's best you stay put. I doubt the principles of these other kingdoms would be better than ours. But a part of my class is enhanced by serving a king. There are knight-specific abilities for people like myself. If there's anyone who can make a king, it's probably our great Eon. I don't have a king class, though. Wait. Does Roma have the prince class? Dash. Yes. But it's still level 2. Roma said quietly, when Jura approached him. Why do you ask, Master Jura? Eon asked. Not me. Roma's an adult, like Lausanne. Unlike Lausanne, his focus has always been more academic and magical in nature, and now, having survived, he's mostly an administrator for merchant companies. It's almost like someone who's a prince relegated to an office boy, though he certainly doesn't seem any bit bothered by that sort of reality. Well, if anyone's asking, I am honestly not interested in the whole prince thing. I'd even give the class away, if I could. I am honestly not sure why I even still have the class. Salah's still around, in some form, so the title remains. Well, I wanted the prince class, and so Jura asked. So, since you do not want the class, would you consider giving it away? That is possible. Eon may have the ability to take it away from you. Yvonne objected strongly. It's your heritage. The hell with it, Mom. I am not interested in being caught in stupid political games that this faraway kingdom of Salah would probably have. I have no relationship with Salah. I never lived there. I don't know anyone there. And honestly, I may well be a lifetime citizen of Freshka. I don't know my father either. And honestly, this class isn't worth it. Well, turns out, I couldn't take it away. Simply because his level as a prince was far too low. He needed to have at least 10 to 20 levels in prince for me to actually take it away from him. Help on this matter came from a very odd party. I am a king, Harris said, back from his many peacekeeping duties. He had to come back frequently, but still, the civil war went on. His wives, now all queen mothers in their own right, squabbled over territory. There were days he felt sad. His wives truly adored and loved him, and that part wasn't a lie. But his harem was held together by him, and him alone. With him giving up his right over the entire kingdom, each queen had to protect her own children. Some of his children are more ambitious, and so, fighting broke out. He had no right to imprison his children, now that they are legally king and prince regents of their own country. He could only reprimand them as a father. If you want my class, you honestly can take it. It's useless now. I am probably going to declare my capital city independent, and let what's left of the Council of Ministers decide where to go. You just sound incredibly sad. Mireille tapped him. What say? You know, let's go out with a bang. Let's end this farce with the next Demon King. The two heroes plotted their plans for the next Demon King. Indeed, they intended to win, but they also intended to die. Harris was able to give me a few levels of his king class, but no more than 20% of it. But strangely, in my hands, the king class was unusable. I mean, I have a king class seed, but I cannot give it or use it on anyone. The class king cannot be used. Can I change it such that I can use it? So, with my soul forge yellow, I tried to experiment on the king class seed. And well, after injecting my own energy into it, it changed. The king class seed transformed into a unique class seed, the anointed king, Eons executor. That's quite corny, isn't it? But that's so StarCraft. Executor. Maybe can I create a hierarch, like Artanis? I had a dilemma now. I have a special class seed, and I wasn't quite sure who to give it to. I didn't want to give it to the heroes, because they had no ties with the valley and me. Ultimately, they are under the influence of the gods, and I wouldn't want them to be king. The first person I had in mind was Jura. He served me loyally over the years, and has demonstrated all the necessary skills of war. He shot it down. No, Eon. Me, a king. There's no way I can do it. I prefer to just teach. Lausanne, perhaps. But she's happily traveling with her husband. Lofen. She shook her head. She was happy tending to young children at Era's childcare centers, and didn't want the stress or the duties of a king. So, I reluctantly put this class aside. But, I had my fellow artificial souls pay attention to the young Valthorns. Perhaps of these young ones, some of them will show promise, and of them, one then I can elevate to a king. 6 more years to the Demon King. If we're lucky. 7. 6. I want it to come sooner. Mireille said. She was really quite eager to return home, and so, when I told her about the entire soul contract and how it works with Yvonne, she immediately rejected it. To her, a soul contract extends her misery in this world by 1,000 years. She didn't want any of that. She missed home, and she wanted to go home. The idea of suicide didn't quite work for her, so she's in this odd situation, perhaps quite like a Norse warrior seeking Valhalla through glorious battle with the Demon King. Because little else can kill her. Her curse had remained relatively stable since my last operation, and I still continued my experiments. I suspect there must be something that binds the curse to the demons, because I didn't understand why it fluctuated at odd times. A fluctuation may be internal or external, and after all my abilities, I am rather certain I ruled out the internal factors. So, that leaves the fluctuations in the curse down to two possible external factors: the gods, or the demons. The curse is a matter of the soul, and something I wondered was, what if a hero was sacrificed in a blood ritual? Or could blood magic's ability to interact with the outer soul be used to fix the curse? Harris, of course, hated the idea. Blood magic should be outlawed. It's a gruesome ability that shouldn't even exist in this world. Nagay. The world's pretty gruesome. I mean, you gain experience by killing stuff, isn't that gruesome? How's blood magic different? It's just the way of killing, isn't it? I'd concede that the only thing different is that blood magic reached into a person's soul and ripped it out, and perhaps that is a kind of desecration of the sanctity of the soul. Again, only if one believes that the soul is sacred. A mortal belief, really. For someone like myself who now has a good understanding of the soul, it certainly doesn't feel sacred. In fact, I feel a bit of desensitization that comes from knowledge. Knowing that a person's inner soul can always reincarnate, and death is but the departure of the inner soul from a physical vessel. If so, in this cycle of death and reincarnation, it's just a convoluted version of swapping one car for another, or stopping one game and starting another new game. So, why should outer souls or lives be sacred? If anything should be sacred, it's that moment in space and time. Space-time is sacred, because death takes it away, and each period of time is unique, and what happens in that space is unique. So, death robs away one's ability to experience each unique segment of space-time. Anyway, back to the blood magic. I certainly want to use my blood mage class seeds, and I want to use it differently. All the previous blood mages have quite warped perspectives and were up to no good, so I am going to try to train a good blood mage. There must be something in their magic that's worth learning. Jura, Lofen and Yvonne were horrified at the idea of training young blood mages. No, no, no. Our existing trainees generally gain their levels and experience against monsters and hybrids. Blood mages require blood sacrifice, and that means people. No, something like that. Doesn't make much sense, though. What's wrong using those about to die anyway? Chapter 93 Trivial Matters. Year 121. My own curse flared up. I wasn't sure why, but if it could happen to the heroes, it certainly could happen to me. Thankfully, Root of Life helped suppress it, but it felt like one of those days when I woke up on the wrong side of the bed and had to nurse a migraine the entire day. It's really one of those days. And well, it's one of those years. I had a few rebellions to crush. A few invasions to defeat. A surge in monsters and creatures from the Rotted Lands. But, there are some good parts. I sent 3 of the ancient tree shards to lilies. Strangely, they actually agreed to give an enchantment should I ever ask for it. They have some powers over death. They gave me a brief origin story of their powers of death. Because they took death ceremonies to another level. In the lake of Lillipod City, any and every death is brought back to be submerged in the lake. A tradition almost a millennia old, lilies have developed a method of gaining experience from the bodies of the dead. Beneath the lake's murky waters are floating roots and vines that consume the corpses of the dead. They had somehow developed a skill that allowed them to collect experience from the dead. I mean, I get experience seeds, but they get experience in levels. I wonder if it's a function of their different species, class, experience, levels. Perhaps, so many years ago, did Indra set me off on this path of being a soul spirit tree by requesting for a familiar. Had I received experience in a different way, would my evolution had been different? I am afraid not. Jura shook his head. Eon has a rather poor opinion of the Huden Council after his encounters with your people a few decades ago. Could you talk to it and convince it otherwise? The council has changed a lot over the 20 years, surely it's unfair for the tree spirit to pin the blame on this generation for the sins of the previous generation. The Huden Council had sent a decent-sized delegation to Freshka after the news of the great druid class being gifted to Ferris. It took them some time, but here they are. Many want the class, of course. Some of these druids have been regular druids for decades, and saw the upgraded class as a chance to break through their stagnant life. Jura shrugged. Trees have long memories. I suggest you come back in, say, 50 years. I think that's not true. It's just that we trees perceive time differently, so those memories feel quite fresh to me. It takes more time for me to forget a grudge, even though it feels just as long or the same to me. No. Great Druid. To a child. The Druid shouted at Jura. Even the entire Huden Council, only 2 Druids have that class. Jura frowned. Perhaps Eon sees something in the child. And I don't recall Druids ever challenging the wisdom of the tree spirits. Domain and Grand Mind Tree has blocked attempted influence. And Eon has just said that he is annoyed at your attempt to use your power. The Druid frowned. A few other Druids looked unhappy. And they stomped off. Jasmine helped to monitor them, but then, a bunch of them were spotted sneaking into the Valthorn's offices and buildings. The tree spirit may have hidden some of the class-granting fruits in the premises. We should sneak in and try to find it. They managed to bribe a Valthorn employee to reveal where valuable items are hidden in the Valtrian Order's premises. So, they snuck in. But wouldn't they hide it in its main tree itself? Another Huden Druid asked. At this point, I think no one ever revealed to the Druids that I have line of sight of the entire valley. Wouldn't anyone be able to figure it out? Do you want a chance to find a great Druid class or not? They snuck into the premises, and then got a shock when they saw the valuables store only had money. It's just storing money. That's because all the weapons, and other items have all been given to the Valthorns and they are responsible for caring for their own goods. Seriously, the concept of a store is not really valid when Jasmine and the other artificial minds can pretty much track all movement of these items almost all the time. Distributing them minimized any risk of theft, and since the valley itself is under heavy surveillance, it wasn't hard to find who took what, especially if it's of value. Money, on the other hand, was rather worthless to me, so its security was left to the Valtrian Council. You know, it won't be there. Edna appeared behind the Druids. There were a group of other Valthorn knights with her. The fruits of a special class only appear when Eon itself decides it so. The Huden Druids turned and summoned animals to fight. They were outnumbered, honestly. There were knights everywhere. The knights overwhelmed the Druids. Those who surrendered were arrested and thrown into a prison. Time for Freshka to hold them ransom for some rewards from the Huden Council. I had the impression they are on the decline, though, so I wonder what they are willing to cough up. Later on, I awarded 2 more Valthorn initiates with special classes. One, a Mountain Druid, and another, a Ranger Master. To some extent, a part of me began to enjoy the chaos that these advanced classes cause. I am rather surprised that you have so many unique classes, Eon. I've been hoarding them for some time. There's some truth to it, but I also have an orchard of class seed growing trees in the Valley of the Unrodden. And it helps that I gather class seeds, skill seeds and experience seeds when people die. Everywhere, as long as it's within the range of my soul harvesters, essence, class seed and skill seeds continue to come in. So, I always have materials to fuse into bigger or upgraded seeds. Master, we need upgrades too. Horns reminded. Their level cap has increased to level 60, but as previously, their upgrades require materials and gems. I decided to upgrade Trevor and Dimitri first, since they've been supporting me for so long, and they are both at their level cap anyway. After that, I upgraded Horns and Juris Bamboo. The yellow type upgrades generally grant my artificial souls to choose a class specialization, so in Trevor and Dimitri's case, they both gained administrator type skills. Horns gained general type skills to control my large army of beetles. I also created more artificial minds, placing them subordinate to Trevor, Dimitri and Jasmine to oversee my vast empire. I already had Acacia, Brutus and Cypress from earlier, but since Trevor can now hit level 60, I elevated him to be pretty much my chief of artificial souls. Dimitri is his deputy. I feel that my artificial souls or minds are like extremely good AI. They are extremely competent at monitoring and administration, but they are constrained on creation in scope, and only improved by the new Soul Forge colors. The level cap also meant that they would never be able to really fight at the level 1 need, simply because enemies like the demonic walkers need a force around level 80. Thinking about it, they are probably an organization's field managers and middle managers. Somewhere, in a quiet corner of my vast kingdom, I also had a secret experiment. This was far from the rest of the inhabited area, away from Jura or Freshka. I created a tree, and infused it with blood. A lot of blood. My roots are able to transport liquids, so I stalked and absorbed the blood from the sick, the dead, or the dying, and then infused a tree with all the blood. Though the elves didn't agree on my experimenting with blood mages, I could very much do it myself. So, a tree. I did so secretly, and eventually, a notification. Unique tree. The bleeding tree created. I was swept with a sickening feeling, like nausea. Grand Mind Tree blocked attempted influence from unknown source. Then I felt better. I need to further upgrade the Grand Mind Tree. Then, I had my beetles secretly smuggle criminals to that location. It wasn't hard. After all, through the entire Freshlands, all these vassal states all have criminals of various kinds. I suppose I am doing some mental gymnastics when I justify my process that these criminals are on death row anyway. So I may as well test some basic blood magic with their bodies. Conceptually, runes are a kind of rituals. Blood magic, too, is a ritual. I myself, and my entire network of trees, is pretty much a massive magical array. I tried to use my roots to cast a blood ritual. It failed. I tried again. Failed. It failed. By the time I was done with the 50 or so criminals, I had failed all my attempted blood magic. Why did I fail? Is it because I used a bleeding tree? I was frustrated, but I got a skill. Skill upgraded. Magic Labs. Blood magic sensor unlocked. So, later that year, I spotted another bunch of blood mages. The world is filled with blood mages, very much a legacy of the hexbomb era, when the knowledge of how to cast a hexbomb was widely distributed to so many kingdoms and countries. Once again, I let them use their blood magic, but with my new blood magic sensors, I think I began to understand it a bit more. Blood magic essentially uses their own soul as a chip, in order to hack into the souls of those sacrificed. Each use of blood magic weakens their own soul, and makes them even more susceptible to the corruption of blood magic, and the strange voices from beyond. It's like taking a part of themselves, making that into a consumable nail. So the insanity and curse that comes with all high-level blood mages is an inherent outcome of their use of such abilities. That insanity is also mixed into the very fabric of the loosely knitted outer soul fragments. Maybe it's like using a diamond to cut another diamond, because they don't have enough power for its alternatives. Have you never found who were spreading the hex bombs? I asked the heroes one day. Find them. No one's going to reveal themselves as a blood mage. In truth, it should be possible to find them, since their souls would clearly be damaged. Each use is like leaving gunpowder residue on their soul. But then, one would have to be able to spot it. I would be able to spot it. All I needed to do is put them under my biolab and it'll be clear as day. Curse. Weakened soul from blood magic. That's what appeared in the few captured blood mages. Their soul spring is clearly tainted, the spring itself cracked, and the waters in their spring is a muddy brown. Based on all this, I am confident in my assessment. Hex is essentially a radioactive decaying outer soul fragments stitched together with blood magic. The decay is how the outer souls untangle the stitching and decay into normal matter. Year 122. I did another controversial series of tests. I hauled a bunch of death row criminals to my soul forge, and attempted a clean version of the outer soul stitching. If blood magic was incomplete work, then could I, the master of 4 colors of the soul forge, perform a complete version? I failed at first. I failed my first 10 tests, and in doing so, close to 500 criminals were killed. That's hell of a gruesome way to die. The heroes said. But it's painless. The overwhelming energies of my soul forge instantly kills them and liquefies them. It's true. The amount of mana used to attempt clean soul fusion was absolutely insane, so much so that when I use it, everyone in the entire Freshlands can feel the mana flickering in the air. Each time, I had a better understanding of the process. Eon, where do you get these ideas? The heroes asked, unaware that I've been watching and experimenting on the blood mages. Dreams. Trees can dream. Why not? You don't have brains. Are brains necessary for dreams? Anyway, it's key to separate the inner soul and the outer soul as smoothly and cleanly as possible. After separation, the inner soul core is released so that it can proceed with its reincarnation, and what's left is a floating magical plasma blob of outer soul fragments. Next, I used my overwhelming mana to forcefully compress the outer soul fragments together. The first few times, I didn't control my mana properly, so the outer soul fragments leaked out and then it just dissipated. Then, as the soul fragments fused together, it finally turned into a small solid object. You've created a soul strengthening seed. Consuming the soul strengthening seed will increase the level capacity of one individual. Needs to be combined with a herb of sufficient quality. What? I thought to myself. I expected something far more powerful than just a soul strengthening seed. But then, the level capacity seems to suggest that each individual has a cap, and so, I have just discovered the item that breaks the cap. And I know exactly the person to give it to. Jura. I fused the soul strengthening seed with a high quality 5-year-old ginseng from my ginseng trees. Eat this. He did, and he felt like his entire body burned for the rest of the day. Eon, What are you feeding me? Why do I feel like every part of me is breaking? Well, a good day later, he woke up and felt much stronger and healthier, as if he was younger by a few decades. Eon. I have a blessing. And I gained 7 levels in Warlord overnight. Oh, soul blessed. Does the soul strengthening seed give levels, or are those like overflow levels that were not affected because he was capped at around level 80? The only way to prove it, of course, is to make more, and give it to someone else that was not stuck at the cap. It's a little disappointing though. I had hoped to create something comparable to, say, a fusion power plant. But I suppose a level breaking ability is not bad either. That meant Lausanne could also break past level 80, if she wanted. But I think she's still happily adventuring in the world. I want to talk about Eon, Harris said to Gerard and Mireille. They were gathered in a room in one of the lodges in Fresca. You know he's listening, right? Gerard looked at Harris like an alien. Eon's presence permeates the entirety of this region. This entire region is a police surveillance state. We agreed on this. No talking about tree spirits anywhere near them. All of us have his familiars. Who knows if it's eavesdropping on us? I know, but I think I don't mind if he listens. Harris said. I just wanted to say that he seems to be very intimately familiar with our world's thought processes. Almost as if he knows what we know. Evidence. Remember how Jura described our wooden arms as power armor? Harris promptly showcased his wooden limbs, made from familiar. I was still unable to fix the 2 lost parts, due to the effects of the curse. But at least it wouldn't get worse. So what? There's so many little references here and there that he understands. I believe he knows about Earth. Look, I can posit a few theories of how he knows about us. 1. He's old, and he met a lot of us Earthers. 2. He has the power to create and alter dreams. By extension, he must have some access to our memories, such that he can create those dreams. 3. His soul harvesters harvest the souls of the dead, and each time, he gains something from the dead. If those dead include Earthers, it is no surprise that he knows what we know. Mireille said. Harris froze, and after thinking for a long time. You're right. I probably didn't think it through. We have 4 years left till the next Demon King. We're in no condition to fight it. Mireille said. Though she's not dead, she is weakened by the curse. If I must admit, we must be prepared to lose and die. Gerard nodded. So, let's do what Astra did. Kill ourselves and bomb it to death. No, Mireille said. You saw what the system did to him. It made us hate him. Well, if we want to go out with a bang, I can't think of a better way. Mireille stopped. Bang. Maybe we could make ourselves into a living bomb. You know, like that manga. This old dude fought the Ant King, but as a failsafe planted a nuke into his heart. We could try that. They all got a headache at the same time, but Gerard had already prepared cups filled with some herbal liquor. They all took a sip. Damned system meddling with our minds. It's a good idea, but who can make a bomb that powerful? Ian's been experimenting with souls, we could ask him to try it. Maybe he can do something about it. Harris looked confused and bewildered. I cannot believe that both of you are suggesting to make yourself into some kind of suicide bomber. It's not suicide bombing. It's a contingency. Gerard said. I wouldn't do it. Harris frowned. If the Demon King lives, it'll still kill you. You know it can and will look for us. You've felt it. We're just like the ring bearer. The Demon King can see us, one way or another. The higher levels we are, the brighter we are to him. Mireille said. It's better for us to knock it out. Harris had been still busy quelling the conflict among his many sons and daughter, so the idea of dying to the Demon King really didn't sit well with him. So what are your alternatives, Emperor Harris? You know you can't outrun it, and you cannot move your children's kingdoms. Do them a favor, buy them some time, and knock out the Demon King when you die. If the Demon King lives and comes for you, your children's kingdoms will be in ruins anyway. Harris was silent. Gerard looked at Mireille. Well, if anything, both of us will find a way to make us self-destruct if we die. It's honestly a pretty fitting way to end our lives, and ironic too. We all died in a car crash, now we get to die with a Michael Bay-style explosion. Why can't we summon the next generation of heroes? Harris said. There must be a way I can trade powers for the right to summon more heroes. Then he had a massive headache, so much so that it looked like he was having fits. Gerard and Mireille quickly fed him some herbal liquor. Wow, that's some intense mental attack. Harris took a while to recover, and then said. I mean, it takes power to summon heroes, right, but can we summon heroes, or perhaps, aid the gods in summoning heroes? That way I don't have to die. I don't mind surrendering my blessings or my levels as cost. You know, that's really a rather good idea. Gerard nodded. But where do we even start? How do we even commune and discuss this with the gods? Chapter 94 Treating Water. Year 123. Since time immemorial, man has been searching for means to themselves more powerful. That is true then, and that is true now. Even nature itself is forever locked in an arms race, as species evolved for an advantage, and other species evolved in response to that advantage. War and evolution are tied together in many ways. This is the latest generation of wood-formed weapons. I showed my latest upgraded versions of the wooden spears to Jura and the selected Valthorns. I had given out 2 more upgraded classes, 1 Grand Knight and 1 Spearmaster. It was a small group, less than 10. Is its effectiveness against demons improved? Slightly. I had spent a lot of time analyzing the crystal matrices, and have managed to copy a little of its effects. But to replicate it wholesale is still beyond me, for now. Every iteration is slightly better, slightly more powerful. Sad, to think that my woodforming is used in this way. I should have made statues instead. One of the wooden spears shrunk, and the attendees jumped. Wow. It's now expandable. That way it's easier to move around. I copied the idea from one of the hero's star mana withdrawable swords. In hindsight, I should have made something like this way earlier. It's essentially just a magical lightsaber, but with wood. Not exactly difficult to make a seed-like thing that releases a spear and later on retracts it. Nature already has many similar mechanisms. In a way, it's also partly pocket space, similar to my secret hideout. It'll be tuned to all of you. Tuned. Yes, with runes. The gem inserts have runes, and so, add a drop of blood to it and it'll recognize you as its owner. Again, not an original idea. Some heroes have invented star mana weapons that only recognize people who have their blood, essentially as a means of preserving power for their descendants. The heroes have this. Well, no. They have better ones. Ah, Edna said, examining her new lance and shield. As a knight, she gets some mount-specific boosts, and so there's some new wooden protective gear for her mount. Seems like I'll have to fight demons soon. It's not hard. The rule is simple. Focus on your target, and don't stray too far outside Eon's suppression aura. Jura explained. He's now level 90. Eon's suppression aura should be everywhere. Ferris said, as he too examined his wooden staff and armor. There were not many weapons I could make for Ferris, because he is a ranged and support hero. I agree. But sadly my suppression aura is weaker as I go further. This means Eon puts the odds of the heroes winning the next battle at close to 0, doesn't it? Our Spearmaster asked. Jura paused. It would be so. It's not exactly uncommon for heroes to die to the Demon King. Their recent string of victories is quite abnormal, and has happened no more than 5 times in the past few hundred years. And so the peace of Harrison ends. Ferris said. An era of relative peace, named after the most visible of the hero kings, Harris. It seems our upgraded classes have not been given out for no reason. Are you afraid, Great Druid? Edna smiled. Should I not be? Worry when the time comes. Jura spoke. For now, practice, and keep gaining levels. Certainly. Edna nodded. Eon, are there any restrictions of use for these items? No. Try them out on the hybrids. I recall a large group has been spotted. Gladly. Those with the upgraded classes, and Jura went for it. I believe they will succeed. Maybe even Jura himself would be sufficient, with his recently acquired strength. On the home front, the heroes have been experimenting with new kinds of spells. They wanted to make themselves into a bomb, just like the Demon King. I couldn't help them. I mean, I don't have the ability to give them that kind of power. Trees don't blow up, except for hybrid trees, but that's an outlier. So they had to speak to others, and Gerard had been traveling everywhere. Harris, too, had to frequently intervene in his family conflicts. It was just lucky that his curse did not flare up when he was temporarily away. Eon. Mireille said, when the 2 heroes are away. What's it like, being a tree? I didn't answer. It was more like, I didn't even know where to begin describing it. Sorry. Must be offensive. I suppose it's the equivalent of you asking me, what's it like being a hero? Mireille said. I asked because, well, I am an alcoholic and tea addict now. Rumors are swirling about, that the heroes would not survive the next one. Of my curse, and Harris. She looked wistful. What do you think of this idea, the hero bomb? It wasn't the first time she asked. I said it was a wise decision. It's a good one. It's pragmatic. Mireille paused. I hoped you'd not give me the same answer. Tell me it's wrong. It's wrong. Mireille laughed, and then cried. Fuck it. Gerard's running around in a wild goose chase. I don't think there's any mage who knows how to make themselves into a walking nuke. Even if it's a damned good idea. Keep cursing. Yeah, I should probably stop wallowing in my misery. Mireille stood. Here's an idea. Write runes inside my soul. Can you do that? There must be a nuclear rune somewhere. Invent one. Runes work on physical objects. Well, in honesty, I've never tried. I am not aware whether runes can be written in the soul realm, but then, the soul spring does have rune-like inscriptions and patterns. Says who? No one. Then can you try writing runes in the soul spring? I am not sure if that's possible, but certainly worth trying. Try it on me. Don't let Harris or Gerard know. Why not? I had the impression Gerard was open to the idea of nuclearizing themselves. Fine. Don't let Harris know. I wondered then, if it's possible to write a rune or blood ritual into the soul spring, such that it triggers a hexbomb-like event. Is this how we can assure victory, but making heroes into nukes? It's pragmatic. Certainly. Sensible. Even. But I get Mireille and Harris' point that there's some quite wrong with it. How is it different from a kamikaze attack? Or in the case of a soldier charging into the firing range, preparing to die? I couldn't quite answer that, but no matter. I poked into Mireille's soul spring again, and this time I used my feelers to attempt to write runes in her soul spring. It didn't work. Not on the rocks of the soul spring. But, I could write runes on the water, or the ground around her spring. But then the waters from her soul spring quickly washed the rune away. It's actually possible. I was amazed. If one could find a way to make the rune stick, then it's possible to have a soul that's covered in runes. Or at least, outside of the soul spring. What? Does that mean you can make me a nuke? No. Not just that. Could I use runes to suppress her curse even further? But, how and where do I start? There are two main hurdles. 1. There's a need to find something that makes lasting runes in the soul area, around the soul spring. 2. What runes do I use, and what is its long-term effects on a person? That's of course, something to research. Criminals exist in every society. Each of the segments of the Freshlands administers its own set of rules and justice, and this is something we, as the federal entity, do not generally participate in. It's a federal-state relationship, though. Simply because I don't want to be bothered by the minutiae, and I am also not interested in micromanaging people. I'd rather focus on trees, gardens and stuff. One area which I do make orders, is that every large town and segment has gazetted gardens and parks, and long strips of trees-flanked roads. This is something the Federal Freshlands Authority, headquartered in Freshka, gazetted and required of all of its cities. A small requirement, really, since it'll handle the creation of trees and parks, the towns just have to leave the space and path for it. That's on top of the protected forests and jungles. In a way, it's almost possible to imagine the Federal Freshlands Authority like the National Parks Service on extreme steroids, to the point that it's the main authority. The Valthorns Rangers are just a militarized version of the park rangers. And since they are militarized, they do also catch criminals. Which are useful. Rumors have been swirling about that criminals caught are subjected to my experiments. That the Eon of Freshka is outwardly a benevolent deity, but it treats its criminals as materials for gruesome experiments. I am rather amused by it. Because it's true. Serious criminals are used for my soul-related experiments. For blood magic. For creating the soul-strengthening seed. After all, the legal terminology used to describe the punishment for serious crimes is subject to Eon's mercy. I didn't know who came up with that. I suspect one clever lawyer or justice of peace, but yes, it's a phrase that has begun to strike fear into everyone. No one subjected to Eon's mercy had ever returned. How could they, with their souls ripped out of their bodies and turned into living experiments? Still, criminals persist, and many of these states have added a layer beneath that punishment. Their citizens demanded something less frightening. Mostly involved life imprisonment. Criminals are quite fun. Actually, and I actually received some rather interesting criminal classes. I even fused them to create more powerful criminal classes. Like, Bandit Lord, or Master Thief. As I thought of this, Jura had just finished capturing a runaway murderer. Punishment for multiple murders. Eon's mercy. I feel like that's such an evil euphemism. It's like saying walk the plank, instead of jumping off the ship. The criminal is tied up, and loaded into a beetle with a cage. A cage beetle. There are hundreds of these beetles, traveling between all the various segments of the Freshland, collecting all these criminals and ferrying them here. To me, For my experiments. A logistic network of high-sec criminals set up to feed my need for materials, coordinated by my artificial minds. Alright. That's 3. Jura locked the criminals inside. They wailed and screamed. Let me out. Please, counsel, I beg you. Not Eons' mercy. The federal law is clear. Multiple murders and domestic crimes put you under federal jurisdiction. Eon has every right to claim you. Please no. Such exchanges were common. Why is it that bad? Kings sentence criminals to death all the time. Usually an executioner with a massive axe would do the dirty job. Jura shrugged. You may consider your appeal before Eon himself. None succeeded. The very fact that my artificial minds have assessed them as targets meant they've passed the preset thresholds. A fellow Valthorn just gulped and looked at Jura. Every year they collect about 1,000 or so criminals. It's on a steady decline, as more and more criminals learn not to cross that threshold. Not much, when the entire Freshland region is now home to some 4 million people, spread across the 15 segments and the 50 cities, 300 towns and 5,000 or so villages within it. The Freshlands is massive, now that I have recovered close to 10% of what was the entire Rotted Lands. Time needed for a beetle to travel from one end to another without rest takes a full 7 days. Freshka itself now is home to about 150,000, being the federal capital and administrative seat of the Freshlands Representative Council. They've been changing the names every now and then. Little matters that I left to Cavio and the representatives. Oh, the Eon of the Freshlands. My attention was drawn to a voice that called out to me. Jasmine was quick to prompt me to look. One of the nobles of the outer cities, he was alone, and he called out to me. If you can hear me, please talk to me. Father, have you gone insane? His son was behind him. He was a lot younger, in his teens. No, the noble said. Jasmine quickly gave me his brief. He's a level 31 noble, and he is the ruler of this city. It's a mid-sized city on the northern edges of the Freshlands, and mainly works with mining and farming from the recovered lands. Then why are you talking like that? I got a skill, young foolish son of mine, and that skill tells me Eon knows I am talking to him. Really? What skill is that? The teenage son asked. Territorial awareness. It's common for kings to have a version of it, but it seemed I got lucky and somehow obtained this. And so you're testing it out by shouting and calling out to Eon, our faraway supposed benefactor. The noble smacked the young teenager. Watch your words. At this point, I supposed I should respond, so I telepathically spoke to both of them. Yes, nobleman. You called. A vine emerged from the ground and crawled in through the window. The teenager looked deathly pale. The nobleman instantly prostrated himself before the vine. Greetings, Eon. So it is true, those rumors of Eon's ever-presence in the Freshlands. Had it not been true? Indeed. It is just that us, those on the fringes, do not feel your presence. Have the Valthorns not sent their men to deal with the hybrids? Ah, I was wasting my time. Is there anything serious? No, I just wanted to test my skill. Ah, I sometimes wonder whether my presence and surveillance was a good thing. I floated in my soul realm, and watched the souls drift in. There were about 150,000 souls in my soul realm, all awaiting reincarnation or whatever awaited their next step. When they are ready, they will shed their outer shells, and only the inner core will move on, to inhabit whatever that the gods had planned. I wondered whether there's a standard process to it. I recall Mozart, the being that reincarnated me, referring to himself as the administrator of this entire process. To think, since that day, I now play a part in the same process that they administered. A cog in the big machine. I once described the soul as a car and a driver. The driver is the inner core, the car is the outer core. But maybe it's also more accurate to imagine their bodies as the car, their clothes and look as their outer core, and their physical body as the inner core. One can change their outer soul shells, just as how Mila and Alexis adopted new classes and new skills. The outer soul is after all just a frame, and the skills that are attached to that frame. Now that I have 4 colors, my ability to interact with these floating souls improved. Some of them are in need of repairs. In a way, this entire realm is my body, and there are segments where these damaged souls are repaired. There's a lot of memories. Of their families. Of life in this world. I had chosen to just ignore these flashbacks. In a way, I am just behaving like a soulless office administrator, putting a stamp on their documents before sending them on their way. I didn't want to care about their life story. It was too much. In fact, the more I learned of their life story, it just made me feel worse, because here I am, as a soul tree. It's like that meme from the MCU movies. I guide others to a treasure I cannot possess. And here, I see memories of a life had and lost, that I cannot obtain. Greater than are you a soul tree too, lilies? Do you have a soul realm? Less than. Ah. Greater than what do you do with their memories? Less than. I paused. Greater than yeah, me too. Less than. Maybe it was right that I didn't go through their memories. Did they deserve at least that bit of dignity? I recall that Lilies was rather aloof about this whole arrangement, that they looked at it all from the angle of an overarching ecosystem. That the death of one is but a necessity. Am I becoming like that, desensitized to death? Now that my domain and grand mind tree is able to block outside influences, is this, really me that's transformed into this jaded tree? Greater than I am. I am afraid of what I am becoming. Less than I didn't know why I said that to Lilies, but at that point, I really didn't have anyone else to turn to for advice on life as a tree. I had become desensitized. When I think about it, some of my choices are not my best. Even when I tried making better choices, it doesn't always turn out better. Lilies didn't reply for a whole week, then one day they just responded. How? Where? I don't know. Grand Mind Tree had blocked outside influence from fellow trees. Override. Grand Mind Tree has temporarily allowed outside influence. I felt a sense of comfort. My fellow forests are now vast network of trees that stretch the entirety of the freshlands. The land has been damaged by the demons, but we've brought it back from the dead. The land is hurt, but we can fix it. Must I become one with the rest of the forests? Our fates are tied together. These trees depend on me, and as it is, I too, depend on them. Greater than do you lean on your fellow trees? Less than I suppose is a crutch. Maybe Lilies doesn't need it, because they, were born this way. But I was human, and my mind still has the lingering structure and processes of a human. It is a lot. I feel like it is. Dash. The two of them sparred. Jura was quicker. Edna was still about level 60s, though she had an upgraded class. Juris Warlord class is pretty much an upgraded class too, though a common one. But as a Grand Knight, she had a unique set of skills. It was the whole debacle of the fused classes, such as Warlord, versus specialist classes, such as Grand Knight and Great Druid. The other Valthorns watched. Yvonne, too. Juris gotten a lot stronger. He somehow broke through his level cap. It's a secret, of course. No one knew how he broke through the level cap, just that it happened. But Yvonne was no fool, and she quickly concluded that I did something. After all, it wasn't the first time I tried to help Jura break through the level cap. She was also smart enough not to publicly say it. Ferris was level 50 plus, his leveling was a little slower as somehow he didn't gain levels as frequently from battling hybrids or demons. If he wanted, his ability to influence trees was quite strong. Luckily, he couldn't get past my defenses. I wonder if the Lord of the Forest could, so, I decided to just destroy that seed instead. If I wanted it again, I could just merge 30 Great Druid seeds, but keeping it lying around was a risk I didn't want to take. Chapter 95 Tremendous. Year 124. The Demon King's coming closer, and the weakening barriers somehow strengthens the hybrids. Then we spotted the demonic portals, and out came the champions. Ah shit. Here we go again. Champions. Walker class demons. Or more like, walkers were champion class demons. The Rotted Lands occasionally spawns champion class monsters, but they are quite passive, usually just roam around where they spawned. But a return of the champions means the Demon King isn't far. So, are you guys ready for the next one? The three heroes are in their 50s now. They came 40 years ago, and this will be their 5th Demon King, although they didn't have to fight the second one, thanks to Astra's bomb. No, we haven't fixed the fundamental weakness that we do not have a healer. I couldn't fill their role. I am not a battlefield healer. I am like that hospital back in town that they rush back to. And we do have a gap in damage output. We could recruit Jura. Gerard suggested. I sparred with him a few times, and I think he's about 20% of our level, maybe less. No, I was quick to smack that down. I wasn't going to send my best man to his death. But that was an interesting estimate. The heroes are around level 130 to 140, and yet a level 90 Jura is only 20% of their strength. That meant the growth at the higher levels is higher, in terms of stats. Ah, I guessed it. But Eon, you should train an archmage that can reach level 150. Easier said than done. I used so many experience gaining and training related abilities on my elite Valthorns, and Edna is only level 62. which is just a little bit faster than how long it took Lausanne to get there. I reckon the speed is due to experience, and also an abundance of hybrid demons for Edna and her batch to fight as real combat experience. Anyway, Jura led my elite squad of Valthorns to one of the champions. They would attempt to fight one, with one of my giant attendant trees nearby as aura and support. I wouldn't let them die, of course, but I wanted to see how my new elite squad stood against a champion. Could they do it? Anyway, this was a good time to watch. The demon champion wasn't an exotic shape or form, instead, it took the form of a massive winged demon with horns. A typical demonic look. Jura stood. Well, it's more intimidating than I expected. A group of 10. Jura at about level 92. Edna at level 62. Ferris at level 55, the rest about level 40s to 50s. The gap's honestly big, but most of them have upgraded classes, which puts them above the strength of their level. Fear Ward morale boost. The Grand Knight used her skills. Well, Jura nodded, and he too had received upgraded familiars. Aura. Demonic suppression. Alright, it's 10 on -1. Eons watching, and he needs to know whether we can take it. There were swarms of beetles around to ensure that their 10-on-1 fight was not interrupted. They fought. They fought hard. And they were still inadequate. Mainly, everyone else other than Jura. Even Edna's shields and abilities were not at a level strong enough to parry the demon champion's attacks, until she switched to the anti-demon weapons. I supposed I cheated, because I have these hero fragments which just makes me intensely overpowered against demons. Still, they won. But I had to use a block or two. Conclusion. All of them needed to be around level 70 for the fight against the demon champion to be a certainty. They also needed a far stronger damage dealer and live healer. A druid was not a pure healer. Not like someone with the healer class was. I had some healer class seeds, and I wanted to create a pure high-tier healer. It was not just healers. I wanted high-tier mages too, and high-tier rune masters as well, to do the things I wanted. Meanwhile, the heroes were getting ready. 2 years left, and already the continents faced the demonic attacks. It seemed that this time, the demons would be concentrated on our continent, because most of the demonic rifts have been detected here. Based on the heroes' network of informants all over the country, this demon king is shaping up to be another conventional demon king. Is that a good thing? We should be expecting hellhounds soon. Ah, that's nostalgic. I had a woodhound from back then. And the demon knights and their elites. So, what should we prepare? Edna asked. Anti-fire magic. The conventional demon king is heavy on fire, axes and overwhelming force. Jura advised. What have you learned from our combat with the champion? We need to be stronger, and our team composition can be better. Edna shrugged. I have a few anti-demon skills as Grand Knight, but not enough. I've been rather useless throughout the entire battle. Ferris frowned. My vines are not strong enough to damage the demon champion at all. My summons are quite useless too. In truth, a druid and a fire demon is a very bad matchup. The only reason I personally have any use is because my fragments make me overpowered. Stronger skills. All of them agreed they needed stronger skills, but I wonder how I could give them some of my anti-demon properties, other than through my weapons and items. If only they could get some of my passives. Hero weapons. The gear we have here is as close to hero weapons we can get. Jura explained. Well, I do have many sets of weapons I made with Harrison Gang, but I kept that for now, mainly because after this generation of heroes, I may not get the chance to interact with the next batch, so I should keep this generation's weapons as a rare item. It ultimately comes down to levels, and I agree with Ferris. Ferris should therefore be stationed in the back. I will request Eon for the Grand Knights to be deployed. Later on, the Freshlands Federal Authority and the representative of the segment states had gathered for a military briefing. The topic is obviously the Demon King. For these representatives, this was their chance to extract maximum benefit from the federal authority. The states have all appointed their own generals and military commanders, but as enshrined in the constitution of our federation, and with my blessings, the beetles will be deployed to defend all the segments against the demons. The Valthorns, of course, have to join the battle as the elite force. The heroes too, had deployed their summoned units to fight demons beyond the borders of the Freshlands. Gerard was frequently away to tackle the demon champions that appeared. He, a high-leveled hero, could handle the demon champions easily. I was wary of another Rotterdlands-style event, so I increased the number of giant attendant trees in the distant regions, forming a ring. The ideal is that if something like the Rotterdlands happened again, the giant trees can last a bit longer, and give me ample warning to prepare. The last round, the Demon King was on another continent, so I too somehow felt safe. It was totally a flaw in my thought process, but yeah, there's an urgency to this matter. I had reinforced the root walls on all the borders, and hand began stockpiling my tuberous storage. If needed, I'd have to release large quantities of mana at one go to offset the pressure from a Rotterdland-style corruption bomb. I also added another of trees and root walls around Freshka and the valley, for a total of 3 layers. One at the borders, one around Freshkan region, and one around the valley of the Unrodden. If a bomb blew up, I'd be able to buy 2 to 3 hours for a response. I had made a basic strategy framework for a Demon King. 1. Survival up till the point the Demon King is slain. This meant constructing defenses, mobile populations, and armies to deal with the lesser demons. On this point, we have the Beetles, a growing Valthorn elite, and each of the regions have their own armies, adventurers and so on. 2. Supporting the heroes to slay the Demon King. The longer the Demon King is not slain, the more damage it can cause. So, once the heroes appear, they need to be supported so they can get to the level needed as fast as possible. Sometimes this take 1 to 2 years, and during this time there's absolutely nothing that can stand in the Demon King's way. Maybe I could, but I wasn't sure, and I have no intention of taking that challenge on. Once the heroes are found, they should be groomed and properly armed. This, of course, is somewhat against my past practice of non-interference, but clearly it didn't work that well. 3. Surviving the aftermath. We've seen from the past few Demon Kings that there's usually a death trigger, and a post-recovery period. In some cases it's a bomb, in some other, a plague. We don't know what this Demon King will bring, but walls, mana, a widely distributed force, and time will be needed. If it's a corruption bomb, root walls will be effective. If it's a nuke, the root walls will be destroyed, but they will reduce the fallout area. What if a magic interference ability happens again? Jura asked. We currently still have very little good alternatives to the message spell. That's the number one risk, I think. A communication breakdown will damage our ability to mount a response. So, I had Jura train and set up a system of runners and messengers. The Valthorns were a bit taken aback when I suggested having a system of locating and supporting the heroes. You want us to make items for the next generation of heroes? Harris and Mireille were both rather surprised by it. Yes. If you don't make it, you should leave something for the next generation of heroes. I'll keep it for you, and give it to them. Unless you don't trust me. This was a response to point 2, of course. How do we get the new heroes up to speed as fast as possible? No. Just that, that's a good point. Why didn't we think of it? Harris said. Because there's no one we could trust that would ever give up a hero class item to the heroes. Why would they even tell the new heroes, who arrived a year or 2 after we died, that there are items for them? Mireille answered on my behalf. It's a good idea, really. I just don't know why I didn't think of it too. But then, we didn't have an eternal tree that we could trust. I mean, our lives are already in Eon's hands. What are some items? Try to make enough for 5 generation of heroes. If a hero could inherit the weapons of multiple generations of heroes, that may give them the leg up they needed. Or make them too powerful. But the heroes are already too powerful. The fact that there's always a successor generation of Demon King, in 10 years, essentially keeps them in check. If you want, you can also write a special journal or writing that can only be opened with star mana, that you can leave for the next generation's hero to read. They nodded, and they spent months on it. They made items, wrote magical books. Things. Memories from one generation, to be passed on to another. They all made things. Harris made shields that summoned shield soldiers. Mireille made lightning axes and staffs that also summoned lightning elementals and flying thunderbirds. Gerard made multiple swords that also summoned magical gladiators. When they made items for others, like their descendants, they had needed to be mindful that the items needed star mana to activate, so, they had to ensure the items contained enough self-sufficient star mana such that their descendants, who are born without them, can still use the items. But when they made for future heroes, who will have star mana, they can pretty much go all out, since they didn't have to consider the star mana supply. So the power of the items contained, nigh unusable to anyone else because of its star mana requirements, is extremely high. Again, I don't see why they couldn't have made it and stored it somewhere. No one could have used these items other than heroes anyway. At least, the full abilities of it. It's still limitedly useful in the hands of non-heroes because it's generally strong and all that stuff. And, I had them stored. I will give one of each item to one hero of the next generation, so each generation will receive around 5 to 15 items. It was rather difficult for the heroes to make the same items, so what I will do, as discussed with the heroes, was let the next generation of heroes choose what they wanted. I've become the tree of items too. Secret hideout upgraded. Wood forming upgraded. Year 125. Demon King Guiwang has arrived. The Demon King was early. At first, nothing much seemed to have happened. The Demon King is here, but we don't know where it is. The heroes convened. You don't. I was rather surprised by this. It's on this continent. No. No damage. Not a single sighting so far. Huh. But then, isn't it destroying anything? I have no idea either. None of the heroes had any idea what was happening. Every Demon King in the past left a trail of destruction wherever it went, so this one being absolutely unseen is strange. Is it in the Rotted Lands, collecting its strength? The Rotted Lands is vast, and I do recall some Demon Kings generally just lays around doing nothing for a while. We looked with our summons. Nothing. Gerard said. Then, is this Demon King invisible? Or an assassin type? If so, I had ensured that everyone was on high alert. Eon thinks this Demon King's going to jump on us. Yes. Likely to be an invisible or assassin type that would only pop up when it's really sure it's seen us. We can sense it, right? Gerard closed his eyes and attempted to use his heroic sense. And yet, nothing. We should just travel together, just in case an attack on the border. Demon champions, 3 of them. And an army of hybrid demons. I sent beetles to fight them, and then, I allowed the demon champions closer. Once they were in the vicinity of my giant attendant trees, I unleashed a flurry of anti-demon skills and my hoarded pile of anti-demon bolts. They were tough. After all, the battle still occurred a distance away from my main tree, so the effects of my passives were weaker. But I eventually destroyed all 3 of them. You gained a level. Level 158. Skill. Obtained. Demonslayer Pit. Creates a pit that significantly weakens demons trapped within. Attacks made within the pit all gain anti-demon properties. Huh. A stationary trap ability. What's the point? My thoughts were instantly interrupted by a surge in power. The heroes were fighting. The Demon King finally made its appearance. A large winged demon, its scales so shiny they resembled polished chrome. It had large claws and its swipes made large gashes in the ground with every swipe. How and when did it appear at the outskirts? We can't let it fight here. Harris shouted as he dodged an energy attack. The ground cracked where it landed. I felt the pain of the ground and the trees damaged by it, and soon, the area was already decimated. There's a city not far from here. Then we lead it into the Rotted Lands. Mirai said, and she transformed into lightning itself, and all 3 heroes were sucked into a lightning sphere. The Demon King effortlessly followed. It was out to kill them. They didn't go too far. They managed to travel about 1 beetle day's journey into the Rotted Lands, and bought some space between themselves and civilization. I could see it, because this entire area was filled with hybrid trees that I gained control over. I was relieved that even with the Demon King so near I still have control. Should we cut it off, though? Trevor asked. The Demon King may use some kind of psychic attack. No. I wanted to watch the Demon King fight. Just prepare countermeasures. The heroes crashed in an uninhabited area far away, filled with hybrid demon trees. It's rocky terrain, filled with small mounds and hills, and the explosive demon trees. The 3 heroes were all fully armed, and they dodged. The Demon King wasn't about to let them talk, as the Demon King's massive claws created another scar in the ground. I felt it, the sudden extinguishing of lives. Trees that often just get destroyed in every single combat. The heroes used attacks I've never seen before. Beams of starlight, slashes that had energies of the star mana. Bright white colored energy slashes. The Demon King and the heroes traded blows, and dozens of demon champions appeared as well. The Demon King summoned them to annoy the heroes, because in this star mana form, they could destroy the demon champions with a single skill. Yet the Demon King stood strong and it took hits like it didn't hurt. But it probably did, because Gerard managed to cut away one of its 6 silvery wings. Each time they trade blows, some trees get crushed or destroyed. It's reminded of the saying when elephant fights, it is the grass that suffers. But the heroes were too weak. Mirai's performance was dragging them down, and Harris too, was slower. My curse is acting up. Mirai winced in pain. The curse, long suppressed by my magic, was aggravated by the overuse of star mana and their physical exertion. The Demon King didn't let them have a break, either. Barrage after barrage. They may not have noticed that I've been gradually replenishing the vegetation so that I could maintain my vision over the event. Harris took a hit, his armor crushed by the sheer force of the Demon King's silvery claws. A silver demon. The other two heroes unleashed an attack similar to a mini nuke. They tried to put some distance between the Demon King and Harris. Harris was first to die. The Demon King just tanked the attacks, and lost one of his remaining 5 wings. But he got into distance, and with his claws, grabbed onto Harris. The Demon King caught him, and crushed him. Harris has died. You received a fragment. But Harris had prepared for this eventuality, and his body exploded into a mist of blood. The blood mist then transformed into multiple sharp, spear-like shapes. Those blood spears then smashed into the Demon King's body. It pierced through multiple parts of the Demon King's body with tremendous force. An attack made of the hero's blood surely is something else. The power of the attack stunned my magical sensors temporarily, at this distance. It was honestly off the charts. Another set of ITHE Demon King's wings were knocked out. The two heroes didn't flinch as they watched their friend die. They've been through loss, and they are still focused on the Demon King. The Demon King took damage, it roared, and shot out beams of energy. Their tanker and defender was taken out, so they had to rely on a wide set of items, like their crystal matrices which created massive wooden shields. Those items didn't hold up for very long. Each of the shields took 2 hits. Mirei's curse acted up some more. But rather than retreat, she seemed to gain a boost of energy and she threw herself at the Demon King. Damn you! She shouted and she ran in with a staff of lightning. I felt all my magical sensors go nuts again then. She was drawing her soul into her attack. And the Demon King, already weakened by Harris' blood spear, had half of its head blown off by an intense purple lightning blast that contained all of her soul's power. Then Mirei collapsed. Mirei has died. You received a fragment. Gerard was the last. He stood alone, against a silverish Demon King with 2 wings left, and half of its head and body destroyed. Purple lightning seemed to constantly attack it from nowhere. A thunder and lightning curse. Each lightning strike seemed powered by the hero's soul. Just you and me, buddy. Gerard closed his eyes. It's finally time for me to also return home. Wait for me, my friends. He too threw his entire soul into his gladiator's gladius. It shone with a bright blue light, its energy distorted the air. Its glow was so bright that it seemed like the sun itself appeared. Once again all my magical sensors go insane. I won't live through this anyway, but you are going down with me. Gerard charged at the Demon King. The Demon King somehow roared, and I felt the world's demons all drained into it. Some of the hybrid trees were sucked up, and the Demon King's 2 claws glowed. Both of their attacks found their targets. Gerard's gladius stabbed right in the Demon King's chest. It pierced through the blood-speared body. The Demon King's claws stabbed through Gerard's stomach. Die with me, Gerard shouted. Drunken explosion. His body seemed to turn into an alcoholic mist, and it ignited all the naturally explosive hybrid trees together. It was a loud and massive boom. It set off a chain of hybrid tree explosions that destroyed everything within 100 miles, and created a smog so thick that it lasted for 3 weeks. Demon King Guiwang has been destroyed. Gerard has died. You received a fragment. You received 3 heroic souls. You can now create 3 titans. You currently possess enough energy to support 2 titans. You gained 10 levels. You are now level 168. Skill significantly upgraded. Woodforming. Skill significantly upgraded. Hybrid botany. Skill significantly upgraded. Constriction. Skill significantly upgraded. Subsidiary tree. Subsidiary tree limit increased on 300,000. Great attendant tree limit increased to 10,000. Skill significantly upgraded. Demonic suppression aura. You reached level 160. Domain ability. Ionic variation unlocked. Ionic classes and variants have been introduced to the world. Class users worldwide can now obtain Ionic variant classes such as Ionic Ranger, Ionic Knight, Ionic Priests, Ionic Druids, etc. You may also now upgrade a class to their Ionic variants. Ionic variants have slightly different skill sets and gains extra boosts when using Ionic items. Animals and monsters around Eons valleys may also have Ionic variants. You've unlocked 2 unique classes. Each of these 2 classes can only be awarded to 1 person at a time. Eons Demonslayer. Class focused on demon slaying. Gains significant anti-demon slaying boost. Able to remotely apply demonic suppression aura that's equal to Eon's main body around itself. Eon's Field Scientist. Class focused on magic and research. Unlocks a wide range of lab-related and soul-related skills. can instantly set up teleportation beacons between a field lab and the magic labs within Eon's secret hideout. I gained 10 levels. Holy cow. And it wasn't over. There was a string of messages and notifications that came from Mirai and the other heroes. Mirai has bequeathed 30 experience seeds. Mirai has bequeathed 10 lightning mage class seeds. Mirai has bequeathed 20 mage class seeds. Gerard has bequeathed 22 experience seeds. Gerard has bequeathed 15 brewmaster class seeds. Harris has bequeathed 10 king class seeds. King class seeds absorbed into anointed king class seed. Harris has bequeathed 10 master trader class seeds. Harris has bequeathed 10 inquisitor class seeds. Inquisitor modified to Ionic Inquisitor class seeds. Harris has bequeathed 25 experience seeds. Ah, where do I start? Chapter 96. Choose your tree titans. Year 125 continued. All 3 heroes died in their fight. They've managed to kill the Demon King, but they fell with it. Harris' broken empire immediately devolved into war. War was declared the day the news arrived in their cities. He must be sad if he knew that the truce he brokered didn't even last a day after his death. It's a common thing, and has happened throughout history. After the heroes die, whatever they built tends to fall apart. If I die, the Freshlands will collapse too. I realized in a way, this empire I have right now is almost the same. Certainly. Jura said. As it is, the safety of the entire valley is backed by your prowess. Without you, nothing much else holds the valley together, other than a shared area. And we've seen them, happy to slay each other. Conflict is eternal, Yvonne said as she trained a new bunch of children. But so is progress. Train, and we get better. Progress in level terms, or progress in a society. Speaking of which, I can create titans now. That meant I can choose to power up that dormant walker the first half. But those were not the only choices I had. For the Titan souls, the system gave a few options. Giant tree serpent. Nidus, a massive serpent. Able to use earth and wood magic. Starts at level 70. Gains powers to summon all sorts of serpents and poisons. Master of poisons and has the ability to brew multiple types of potent poisons and cures. Able to grant poison immunity. Giant storm bird. A massive bird with powers of wind, water and thunder. Gains power to summon eagles and hawks. Eagles and hawks can carry goods and people. Has power to grant wind mage and flight ability to those worthy. Can control the local weather and improve irrigation. Starts at level 70. Fusion with Juris bamboo to form a Titan class summon. Starts at level 80. Takes the form of a massive wall of thorns. As a summon, it has high burst type output. Transferable, and also significantly improves its host strength and base stats. Host of the Titan summon will not age. Fusion with horns. Starts at level 80. Transforms horns into a Goliath kingbeetle that's able to use earth magic and various other protective and offensive abilities. Goliath kingbeetle can create royal warbeetles. Also produces very high quality beetle silk. Royal warbeetles can improve crop output in the area. Fusion with a giant attendant tree creates a Warmaster treant. Starts at level 70. High toughness and use of wood magic. Warmaster treant is able to create lesser treants to assist in combat and other duties. Also produces high quality teas and fruits. Fusion with Grand Mind Tree creates the Tree over Mind. Starts at level 75. Massive psychic magical abilities. Expands secured telepathic communication to the entire continent. Unlocks mind reading ability for anyone within the local valley, which allows limited mind reading of any targeted person in the local area. Also unlocks psychic, mental attacks and the power to send nightmares and dreams to anyone in the local valley. Psychic attacks do not work on demons. And lastly, activate the Walker. Fusion with Walker Corpse. Creates the Walking Tree City. Starts at level 75. Has the ability to produce wood warriors and also simultaneously control them. Limited to 5,000 wood warriors at any point, and wood warriors cannot travel far from Walking Tree City. Has ability to use long-range projectile attacks. Also carries a mobile healing spring and accommodation on its body able to accommodate and feed up to 1,000 people. Produces fruits and vegetables on its back too. I was quite struck by analysis paralysis, and I had no real urgency to select one, since, well, I have 3 of them and I can keep them until I noticed what I really wanted. I mean, I have 3 Titan souls, and I can support 2 of them. In truth, I wanted all of them. And from my experience with this system, it's likely that I unlock even more choices as I go along, or just become aware of them. So, there may be merit to choose the next option later, when I have more choices. I mean, All of the Titan choices were good, one way or another. Greater than what do you think, Lilies? Less than. I shared the news of the Titan souls to Lilies. I wasn't sure why I did it, but I wanted to tell someone, so I told Lilies and Jura. Jura was too stunned and didn't quite know what to advise me. To him, this was the realm of gods, and he wouldn't be able to choose. Which was strange, but maybe he just couldn't bear with the weight of the choice. Greater than no preferences. Less than. Ha. No. I am not going to do that. Or maybe I should. I didn't know. I wonder what kind of choices Lilies would have gotten, if they were in my place. Maybe something over death, or something like a city. Since that's what they have power over. Greater than Lilies, if you made an item for the heroes, what would you make? Less than. It didn't reply to me. I mean, I asked that question because the heroes were making items for the few next generations, and I wondered what's a good item I would give. I mean, could we cheat this system in some way? A sword that accumulates power as it passes through the hands of each and every hero, eventually reaching the point that it can kill the Demon King outright. I mean, that's like an anime plot, but magically and system-wise, that's possible, right? A weapon that kept gaining levels. A weapon to slay all the demons. I had that idea a while ago to fuse an artificial soul into a sword or spear, but that doesn't really make a weapon that much stronger. A weapon made by the hero, formed from star mana, is still stronger. Partly because artificial souls on their own aren't that strong. But if I could make a Titan soul version of a living, growing weapon, wouldn't it eventually reach a point where it can slay the Demon King? Dash. The heroes are dead, Yvonne said, as she announced to the group a few days after it happened. The Valthorns were mostly quiet. For them, these young ones, they've lived their entire lives with Harris, Mireille and Gerard as the surviving heroes. To some extent, this was Pax Harrison. A period of relative peace thanks to the quick destruction of the Demon King by the heroes. This era has finally ended. What now, Principal? They asked. Nothing. It was just an announcement that all of you should know. For us, we go on as usual. We prepare for the next Demon King, and the next. Edna looked at Ferris. Well, our worries were for nothing. What? You wanted to face the Demon King? Did power get to your head? Ferris rolled his eyes. Since their last battle with the Demon Champions, they've been constantly gaining levels, and now Edna and Ferris are both in the early level 70s. Ah. No. Another 10 years of relative peace. 8. Data collected suggests that the 2 years before the Demon King arrives is filled with demonic attacks. Minor attacks. Nothing we can't handle, especially now that there's 3 of us Grand Knights. Edna said. I hear from Master Jura that he may be considering a second Great Druid too. With all this strength, I think we can handle a demon champion or 2. Really? Ferris seemed worried. Who do you think? Edna smiled back. Aw, come on. Don't play coy with me. You know the answer. I don't. I swear. Edna just walked. Hey, you two seemed happy. The Spearmaster, Lovies, poked in. Are we having a gathering of the upgraded classes soon? Ish. Edna frowned. From what I can see, all of them are still somehow around 70–80% of Lausanne's full strength. Lausanne had the special familiar, the possession of the devoted, and that alone made her stronger, even if she had just regular classes. But the possession of the devoted has strange unwritten conditions, and I have not been able to award them to anyone yet. As the young batch of upgraded class Valthorns talked, Jura and Yvonne just looked at each other. What do you think of this batch? They're good, Yvonne said. At their level, stronger than me. Well, you used to be stronger than me. Jura smiled. Used to be. Not anymore. On that topic, tell me, how did Eon break through your cap? Well, something that won't help anyone. I think only he can do it. It's something soul-related. Yvonne shrugged. The Valtrian Order's staff strength has increased to about 15,000, with 12,000 in Freshka itself, and the remaining 3,000 in the various city-states. They act as our representatives, recruiters and caretakers. The Valtrian Order's 2 main wings, the military wing, and the social wing, are meant to be mutually reinforcing. The social and health wing, in addition to its social support services, is also a means of funneling young children with nothing much to lose to the Valtrian Order's ways. It works well, and the local rulers recognize it, so they often set up competing institutions in order to divert talent away from me. The social wing, in addition to regular orphanages, also includes funeral parlors, hospitals, childcare facilities, some schools and some food stores. Then the Valtrian Order started getting notified of it. I could feel them. They were scattered throughout Freshka. At first, 10, then 20. Then 100. It's like I instinctively knew where they are. My class. It changed when I woke up. It's now Eonic Ranger. A ranger said to his colleagues on the walls of Freshka. He was not the first, but many others started getting similar notifications. What does it do? Not everyone got it. Some did. I don't know. The ranger said. He was still coming to terms with his changed class. Those whose class changed generally are a bit more spiritual, and they tend to either pray to some kind of tablet, or regularly visit the temples and other social sites that I have. Some are familiar faces. I've seen them at my tree of prayers. They would be healthier, and as long as they are near to me in my network of trees, they will be stronger. Their defensive moves were upgraded too, and they would gain some advantages when fighting demons. A few priests, who regularly perform rituals, funerals and births, gained Priest of Eon. As a priest, they gained the power to grant protection of the valley, a temporary blessing that grants them energy from the valley. Ferris, too, woke up one day and he was Eonic Great Druid. You didn't get an upgrade, Edna. No. I suddenly feel inadequate about it. Edna frowned. Indeed, Jasmine and my artificial minds were quick to theorize that all those who got the Eonic classes were, to some extent, believers. Perhaps not to the degree of a god, but as a local deity. And now that belief has manifested itself as a class. There was a small uproar too, among the priests. Eon has ascended and has gained power to grant unique classes. This is proof of divinity. They shouted and claimed. I cringed. Sure, now I can grant special classes. But divine. There's a massive spectrum to the gods, surely. Lilies spoke suddenly, abruptly. Greater than less than. Greater than what level are you? Less than. It didn't answer. Maybe asking their levels is like asking a woman's age. It's probably offensive. Greater than sorry. Less than. Greater than what? Less than. I didn't know what they meant for a moment. But then I soon got a rather quick notification from my network of informants. The Church of Nera has declared Eon as a heretic and a demon. Accordingly, the Valtrian Order and the Freshlands are monsters that must be exterminated. The Temple of Gaia has formally cut all ties with the Freshlands. Woot. We do not recognize and will not do business with anyone who professes to be a believer of Eon. The Church of Ava has declared Eon, of the Freshlands as an enemy of the religion. The Church of Hawa has declared Eon, of Freshka and the Freshlands, as a heretic and enemy of the faith. Ah, it came suddenly, but 4 churches suddenly declaring me as a heretic. And I just as quickly, I had an uprising in my own realm. All this while there have been believers of all these other faiths coexisting with us, but now these temples and religious organizations pretty much declared outright war on me. I felt a sense of anger. And fear. What can they throw at me? Did their gods suddenly realize that I've stepped closer to the realm of the gods and now considered me an enemy? If this is going to be a conventional war like with the other lesser kingdoms, I will crush them. Eon. Jura said, a large council present. The 4 temples have declared you a heretic. Many of our own have decided to emigrate. There will be a slaughter, and there will be war. The temples have vast armies that they can summon, resources that they can put together. And yet they still depend on heroes to defend them from the demons. In our broken continent, the hold of the temples are weak. There's little faith in these temples when they've seen so much damage. But the faith of the believers are stronger where the temple institutions are strong. So, if there are enemies, they will likely come from the other continents. How many? My artificial minds got to work quickly. Across the entire Freshlands. Not that bad. 10% of our population may leave. Not that bad at all. 10% is small. Perhaps the issue of faith means little when their safety is constantly threatened. Among the nobles and leaders though, it's about 30%. I had to do something. I can't fight a war without leaders. So I turned to Jura and the representatives. After the fall of the demons, my power has grown. My most recent powers involved the introduction of Eonic variant classes into the world. A silence among those present. Even among some of you, I can sense the presence of an Eonic class. One of the present representatives was an Eonic warrior. And so, this provoked the temples in retaliation. They fear your rise, Eon. One of the representatives said. This is a mark of a jealous god. Not uncommon. The Crusades of the Northern Frost was one such war. The representatives discussed the matter among themselves. A tree's roots will break through rock and stone, if it must. If they dare to step foot in my valley, I shall break them. I declared. I am high level, surely I can hold my lands against some Templars. The representatives nodded, and they all went out. The Freshlands Federal Authority will prepare for war. I had things to think about. From the declaration, and the consistent timing, I concluded that this must be a divine message. Else, why did 4 temples act in unison to denounce me? The gods, or whatever they are in limited contact with the temples, and at the same time, their ability to see or perceive the world is probably limited. Somehow, when my domain ability added new classes to the world, that made them aware of my presence. So, would the temples summon heroes to counter me? That would be a very interesting data point, or are the gods tied in that they are unable to summon heroes? I think they can't. If they could summon heroes to destroy me directly, they would have done so. There was no need for the temples to publicly declare war on me. So, the declaration of war must mean the gods have limited tools when dealing with non-demonic matters. At best, they would request the heroes to attack me when the next demon king arrives in the future, but that's still some time away. In short, I can expect the forces these temples will muster will be conventional in nature. Nothing extraordinary. About a month after the declaration, I've heard of various crusading forces preparing for an invasion. It takes time for them to form a coalition. After all, the temple's own standing armies are generally small, and they call on a network of believer states to donate forces for their cause. Per our network, we're looking at about 1-2 million soldiers in total across the 4 temples' armies, but in actual fact it'll be less, simply because not all kingdoms will give the full amount requested by the temples. At this point, it's a good thing to ask, so, where was this same army when the demon king was rampaging throughout the world? Defending their home cities. Stupid. Politics is stupid. At this point a part of me wants to smack some sense into them. Like, hey, I've been protecting the world from demons, and this is what I get. Eon, we detected a spy approaching. He's moving quickly. One of my Eonic rangers commented. He must have believed that he would not be found. Intercept him. My Eonic rangers attacked, and he dodged. Wait, he shouted. I want to speak to Eon. I bring an important message from the Church of Ava. If it is war, you have war. The spy shook his head. It's more complicated than that. The spy was led to an area with a large tree of prayer. Speak. I telepathically said. Edna, and a few knights were there. Just in case. May I have some privacy? The spy said. The things I say must be only for Eon. No, I said. The spy sighed, but then he took out a small pendant. Instantly I felt a kind of holy energy, and Edna's sword moved in. What are you doing? This is the Ava's pendant of truth. One of the 5 sacred treasures of the Church of Ava, and proof that I speak for Ava. Edna's sword closed in. The spy's finger gently touched the tip, pushing it aside slightly. Ava has no intention of going to war with Eon. But the other 3 temples have received divine messages to some degree. Ava, our patron god, has decreed that a war is declared as a formality, but no hostilities will break out. Breaking of trade routes do not count for hostilities. One of the rangers shouted. Some concessions must be made to keep up to charade. The spy said. But we will not send anyone of significant skill or power for this endeavor. This war is a silly thing, with demons at the border. What do the temples want? I asked. I do not know. But Ava was clear. This is a fake war. An act. Well, an act of war, then. But there will be real wars with the other 3. I felt sad. Especially with the Temple of Gaia. I recall being housed in a Temple of Gaia. It must have been destroyed by the Rotted Lands. It didn't have to be a war, no. Is this the part of my life where I am going to play tower defense against a wave of attackers from across the sea? Side story. Lausanne and the Priest of Ava. Circa year 125, immediately after the time the Demon King died. The captain said we'll reach Port Kilos soon. One of Lauzanne's party mates announced the news to the group of 10. They were adventurers, the playing swords, and they've been sailing for a good 5 weeks from Port Angar of the southern continent to Port Kilos on the southernmost edge of the eastern continent. The oceans are vast. It takes a month from one place to another, sometimes 3 months should the weather be exceptionally bad, or some of the large monster fishes create hostile patches. There's been times when a sea serpent made a whirlpool large enough that trade was disrupted for years across the straits. Port Kilos, the southern fortress. Home to one of the largest Ava temples, and seat of Grand Master Enka, one of Grand Triumvirs of Ava. Its walls were made 830 years ago by the summoned hero, Don Mex, and one of the strongest hero-enchanted walls in the world. Still, on the southern part, there was a large hole, a crater from a demonic supercannon blast. A relic of the era of Demon King Sabnok. There's also a memorial there, to remember the 17,000 who died from that explosion. The ship was finally ready to dock. All right. Lozon nodded. She wore a deep green jacket, and she had 3 wooden spears on her back. So what in the world happened in a month? The party, and many other passengers disembarked. The crew and the docksmen started underloading cargo too. But, they quickly picked up something that felt different. There were far more soldiers, and Templars. Ava had Templars, but the Templars rarely left their training grounds except during the Demon Wars. The Demon King had fallen. The 3 heroes died. They got the news, and Lozon just nodded. That's good, she thought. A Templar approached them. Normally, it would just be a regular port official that did visitor screening. Name. Which party? I am Artie, of the Playing Swords. A man in his early 40s answered. He quickly showed his many Adventurer Guild badges. Lozon's husband. It's funny, because Lozon is more of a spear user. Swords are pretty low on her list of proficiencies, but the party had a lot of sword users. Each kingdom recognized their own adventurers differently, so most parties obtained multiple certifications. All right. The Templar nodded. Cleared. The temples are off limits, however. Off limits? One of the party members asked. She was the party's healer, and she's a priestess warrior. That meant she actually has a holy enchanted sword, albeit a lesser one. Is it open for the clergy? The Templar looked at the healer. Clergy may access the outer temples. Central temples off limits to everyone. The Triumvir is receiving a divine message. The priestess warrior's jaw dropped. A divine message. The Templar nodded and signaled them to move along. Lozon walked next to the priestess. Lexi, what's a divine message? The gods, they sometimes send a divine message. Only those who have the right levels and skills can receive it. But the messages usually need a long time to be received, sometimes months, so the high priests would enter into solitary confinement, often with only a skeleton crew to support them. Why do they want to receive it? Usually it comes with some kind of divine blessings, and almost all priests level up quite a bit after receiving a divine message. Really? Lozon just nodded. Artie patted his wife on the back. All right, let's get to our inn. Well, check out what quests we have tomorrow. They woke up the next day to sounds of marching men. An army. What's happening? Artie asked the innkeeper. It was about time for breakfast anyway. Not sure. But the central temples have been closed for 3 weeks already. I don't recall something like this happening in a long time. Lexi nibbled on a piece of meat. That usually means the divine message is quite long. Usually. Have you ever received a divine message, Lexi? Lozon asked. Curious. No. It's a gift for the select few, those chosen by the gods as their voice. For mere mortals like us, we never get a chance. Lozon nodded. Artie came back with a few files. All right. The guilds got some typical hunting missions, and some demon extermination missions. I think the jobs seem relatively easy, so we can split up into 2 groups. Lozon will lead the demon hunting mission. The usual split. She nodded. That usual split meant Lozon, 2 swordsmen and 1 mage. Their team is usually smaller, simply because Lozon, at level 80, due to her unique history, massively outleveled everyone else in the party. Everyone else was around level 40 to level 55. Artie himself was only a level 52 swordfighter. They spent the whole morning going through the quest dossiers, but then, a group of Templars marched into the inn. Heavily armed too, a group of 10 Templars. We're looking for the Playing Swords. One Templar captain said, and Artie nodded. Yes, we are the Playing Swords. Per our records, is Lozon Searwind, the Greenspears present? The Templar asked. Lozon stood. Yes, that would be me. The Templar nodded. All right. Lady Lozon, I am afraid we need you to come with us. The rest of you can stay here. Artie panicked. Wait, she's my wife, is everything alright? The Templar paused, his brain was probably processing the information. I am afraid the Triumvir only ordered for her. The rest of you, please wait here. Will she be alright? Artie asked again, noticing that the Templar didn't answer his question. Lozon smiled. It'll be fine. Honestly, what could they do? Lozon had the best chance of escape, she did have her warden. Dash. The Templar escorted her to the core temples. They didn't attempt to restrain her, so Lozon assumed it had not been a crime. At least, not yet. She did not take her woodspears along, her 3 woodspears were with her party, but still, if she needed a weapon, Warden was more than able to create a few. The core temples were large, ancient buildings, built during the era of the hero's descendants. Don Mex was summoned by Ava, at least, according to Ava scriptures. Who knows how the scriptures have changed over the hundreds of years. Regardless, it was still imposing and grand, and Lausanne nodded. She felt a pressure pressing down on her, but it was a lot lighter than Eons' haunted forests. The Templars guided her to one corner building. It resembled a small keep. It was the Templars' headquarters. She noted the armored guards throughout the building, as the Templar captain led up the stairs to a higher floor. Eventually she arrived at a large room with glass windows that had a beautiful vantage of the ports and the Bay of Port Kilos. Greetings, you must be Lausanne. A middle-aged man said. He sat on a large, beautifully decorated seat, and he was flanked by a few high-ranking Templars. She nodded, and vaguely sensed some kind of skill. Warden has applied magic suppression aura. Skill effects cancelled. Lausanne just smiled. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to use a skill on her. Warden, a special familiar, was unique in many ways. It was like having a mini Eon around, with many of Eon's abilities, to a lesser degree. The Mont's head jerked a little. He probably noticed his skill was cancelled, and the presence of an aura. Well, I should have known it won't be so easy. Alright, let me just give you a brief explanation of why you are here, and why you should cooperate. Lausanne didn't respond. Our records say you originated from the Freshlands, and was born in New Africa. You lived there until 16 or 17 years ago. Technically I was born in Africa. Lausanne corrected. Alright. So, you confirm you lived there until 16 to 17 years ago. Yes. Lausanne didn't see where this was going. So, what do you know about Eon? Lausanne paused. She didn't like talking about Eon, simply because, well, most people didn't understand what it's like to live with a massive demigod whose energies just permeated her world. She grew up under his care, and to everyone else, that was an alien concept. In fact, she spent a few years adjusting to the reality that her experience was extremely unique. What do you want to know? His powers. His weaknesses. Lausanne had a gut feeling it wasn't going to be good. Honestly, I don't know of his weaknesses. Maybe Demon Kings. The questioning Templar's eyebrows moved. His powers: he can summon beetles, create walls of trees and roots, and attack with root strikes. He also has a lot of healing abilities, like, he healed my uncle's dismembered arm. He also has massive shield abilities. Lausanne honestly didn't know the full breadth of Eon's abilities. How far can he attack? Lausanne shook her head. I don't know. What's the furthest? Lausanne paused. Everywhere in the valley. That puts it at 60 to 80 miles, maybe even a 100. Honestly, Lausanne didn't know either. She was not aware of Eon's battle with the faraway walker, nearer to Lillipod City. These questions actually made her wonder how much she knew about Eon, because she realized that she couldn't give a definite answer for most of it. The Templar's eyes widened, and he quickly jotted that down. The middle-aged Templar flipped through his notes in a book. What is this about, really? Lausanne asked. There will be war, milady. A Templar answered. With Eon, as a false deity. False deity. She didn't like the sound of that at all. To her, he was a deity and guardian spirit in every way. She stared at the Templar. On what grounds? Our God decreed so. The Templar said. From what I understand, so will Hawa, Gaia and Nera. Lausanne paused. She wasn't sure how to take the news. Is this war? Are all these people going to march on the Freshlands, against Eon? Are they insane? Have they not seen the thousands of beetles he has? As far as she can remember, Eon's supply of beetles seemed almost limitless. Sure, a high-leveled individual can kill hundreds, if not thousands of beetles, but exhaustion eventually sinks in. They need sleep, food, pee and poo. Eon could just repeatedly throw beetles at them until he finally won. He was a tree. Roots can break stones, and he was not afraid of taking forever to do it. She wanted to speak. No, she was quite tempted to just shout. But the Templar said, we're rather confident. We are even authorized to use hero items. Lausanne paused. Hero items. She thought about it for a moment, and she recalled the hero-made wooden armor that Uncle Jura had. She remembered it quite vividly, and if they can deploy hero items, Eon has them too. She knew for a fact that hero items are weaker in the hands of regular folks, and Eon has way more mana to power the hero items than the temples. Have these Templars lost their minds? Emperor Harris made so many hero items for Eon, do they know about that? She felt conflicted. TreeTree would probably tell her to not say a word. He was fond of pulling off little surprises like that. Maybe he'd even use tunnels and sappers, like he did so many years ago. Am I under arrest? Lausanne asked. She was relatively sure they wouldn't be able to hurt her. Even now, she was confident in defeating everyone in the room. Oh, the Templars flipped through some notes. Yes. I am afraid we have to keep you under house arrest for a while. The higher-ranked Templars walked towards her, and she shook her head. It's all right, I won't resist. The Templars led her to another area of the core temple grounds, and she was given a small but comfortable room. A maid will attend to you, but during this time, I am afraid you have to be here. We cannot have you leaking our troop movements to the Freshlands. Lozan shrugged. She sat, and she processed her feelings. She believed Eon would be fine. No, she knew they would be fine. Only someone with a hero's power can stand up to Eon. All these cities struggled to even contain a demon walker, that's why they resorted to hex bombs. They'd have to bring out their hidden big guns to even have a chance. Dash. Are you alright? Artie came. The Templars strangely allowed her husband to visit her and even gave him the option to stay with her during her house arrest. I heard the gist of it from the Templars. I am perfectly fine. Lozan nodded. We'll just have to stay here for quite a while. The team can go on with their missions. In fact, you can join them if you want to. Lozan winked. Being confined for a few years, what's new? She was confined in a valley for 20 years before and had to fight hybrid demons every other day. This wasn't a big deal. In fact, this was pretty much a staycation. Do I need to warn anyone? Nope. Lozan shook her head. I don't want my mother to know. Her husband sat next to her and gave her a hug. All right. Go with the team. Pretty sure they need you. More than me. I am just going to be trapped in this building for a while. Nothing particularly dangerous, really. He paused, and he looked rather conflicted. Eventually he nodded. Well, probably drop the demon hunting missions without you around. Lozan shrugged. Give yourself some credit, dear. I am sure you can handle them. Go. Don't waste your time trapped here with me. Artie gave her another hug. She gave him a knowing look. The I can break out anytime look. He smiled. All right. Good. He left later that day, and Lozan spent some time exploring her new prison. It was a simple bedroom and she looked into the mirror. Her hair was short, now. She had it cut a few years ago after she found it rather annoying during combat. Short hair didn't get tangled so often, especially when they were in close combat situations. A Templar came in. Milady, your presence is requested by the Grand Master. Oh, Grand Master Enka. Now that's a person she never met yet. He was famously reclusive, and refused to meet. And now she had the chance to meet him. Dash. They met in a small cozy tea room. There were 4 sofa chairs with plush cushions, and the Grand Master was known to be an old man, and has maintained control over the Ava temples for almost half a century. His hair entirely white, yet his body was in no way frail. In fact, his body looked as fit and muscular as any of the Templars. From a distance, one may think he is no older than 40. He gestured to the sofa opposite his, and Lozan sat. A few servants served them tea and cookies. I was told ladies like tea and cookies. Have some. They are the best in the region. Lozan smiled and took a tea. She sipped it. It was a kind of flower tea, a rose and chrysanthemum mixture. It had good balance and a bit of light, fluffy sweetness. The aftertaste was very gentle, and didn't stay long on the tongue. It is a good tea. Grand Master Enka nodded. Good. You must be surprised by these sudden developments, but ill-direct. I've received a divine message from our patron god, and well, it certainly is complicated. Lozan just smiled. She vaguely sensed a skill, again, and she pushed back at it. It wasn't a problem to push it back. She was, for all that it's worth, an Eonic weaponmaster with a total level of 80. She was originally a swordswoman, but after she increased her use of spears and bows, her class fused together. The Grand Master was perhaps of a similar level. The Grand Master chased everyone out of the room with a wave, and he activated another kind of skill. What I say here is for your ears only. We don't want war with Eon, but we must be seen as doing war with Eon. Grand Master Enka said. The other 3 temples do want war, but Ava's more interested in just being seen as participating. Lozan frowned. Why was he telling her this? What's the point? There's nothing she can do. Are you able to communicate with Eon? My scouts and past reports claimed that communicating with Eon is a perilous affair. Many suffer nightmares from being around him. Lozan wondered again. She had to ask. That statement was borderline absurd. Why? There's no such thing as a pretend war. The world's certainly not a safe playground where people can play fight. Anyone else will tell you that you are bullshitting and trying to lie to me. Indeed. That's my dilemma. It's a difficult message, one that I had not told anyone yet. How do I tell others that my God wants me to send these men to their deaths, with no actual intention of victory? For what, then? Lozan didn't get it. Why am I here? Can you communicate with Eon? Yes. But not here. Only back in the valley. My informants told me that you have an extensive history with Eon. So, can we find a way to communicate with him? How should I say this, pointers? Lozan frowned. Be frank and honest. Tell him what your God said, word for word if possible. I believe Eon may understand your God's intentions far better than we do. In my experience, we cannot understand the thoughts of a tree spirit, so the best tip I know is you can only say what you want, and see how he responds. Grandmaster Enka nodded and visibly relaxed. Indeed. Us mere mortals cannot truly fathom the thoughts of greater beings. In honesty, this war is a futile endeavor. If Eon is really a semi-divine being, we mortals have no way of truly harming such a being. Perhaps, only heroes and ancient monsters stand a chance. Lozan leaned forward. That was an upsetting thing to hear. Then why? The gods have a wish. We, their humble servants, must try our best to fulfill it, lest we lose our classes and suffer a divine retribution. A curse. The closer one steps to the gods, the more we are bound by their whims. Enka said, even if it seems as if the task is futile, we must believe in the gods that they will bless us, and that we play our supposed role in their larger, unfathomable plans. So even if it seems like suicide or stupid, you will do it because it's part of the gods' plan. Lozan asked. She couldn't help it. Yes. We must put aside our disagreements and carry out our god's will. Lozan felt tormented, and she stared at the Grandmaster. He seemed every bit the wise and smart man, and yet something like this came from him. Were the gods all like this? Now she felt like she should send a message home and ask Eon to be merciful. She thought of the heroes again, and she remembered how they too seemed like they were pawns of their gods, despite their incredible power. How they were constantly, subtly influenced by the gods. She sighed. And because of this foolish endeavor, I'll remain under house arrest. I am afraid. Yes, milady. Though I can tell our walls honestly cannot hold you back should you ever wish to escape. Their eyes met and she felt it was they who were imprisoned. Chapter 97 Heratrix of Eon. Year 126. The first wave of attackers were just plain conventional armies. Wasn't hard to scare them away with an equally massive display of force. I have a lot of beetles, and my beetles are strong. In a straight fight, I'd win. When the first wave knocked on our doorsteps, those who wanted to leave have already left. Or at least, most of them. There's some that stayed back, and I suspect they are in cahoots with the temples. Jasmine and my artificial minds are actively monitoring them. I didn't arrest them immediately, because I wanted to know what they know. It may be a good idea to find out how deep their network is. So, for now, I'll play along. Let them win some small victories and catch all of them in a single swoop. It's like dangling a lure to catch a prey. There is a general consensus among the populace that I know what they are doing, but that didn't seem to have stopped those that sympathize or support the other four temples from plotting. Most plots are rather simple, really. Find a way to cause damage to me, or find a way to convince people to change sides, or expose some kind of strategic advantage. It also relies on a great deal of trust. That those who plot can trust those who assist them. So, it's not entirely difficult to cause the whole thing to collapse once a bit of fake news and intelligence is added to the mix. Are they willing to act on intelligence that may be fake? There are skills that help that. Such as discern truth. Yvonne said, apparently plotters have some means of verifying facts. That said, kings and rulers have counter-plot skills too, such as discern loyalty, or unravel plots, or some rather cutely named ones, like monkey wrench, which apparently causes the forces of chaos to mess things up. Of course, I wonder whether there are abilities which therefore interfere with my ability to observe them. I believe there are. After all, I've seen the heroes do something like that. Like a silence bubble, or something. There were largely three groups. One of Gaia and Hawa. One of Ava, and another one was a ragtag bunch. The last temple apparently was more straightforward and did not believe in plots. I didn't believe it though. I suspect this was some kind of false information. Some operated in a typical military function. They focused on gathering information about my military forces, and well. Domain has blocked attempted espionage skill. Yeah, that happened multiple times during this month. It seemed that Domain also interferes with a wide variety of skill types, especially those that come from afar. Domain has blocked attempted scrying. The temples sent many waves, and throughout my borders, those kingdoms and nations have been forced to let the crusading armies pass. It wasn't a choice for them. Should we just let them march through our neighbors? The council gathered. It's more of a war council now, with the representatives across the Freshlands sending their generals and leaders. There are many who are now my sympathizers. As a divine tier being, the nobles and rulers of the various segments and cities have a clear choice. Side with the temples, or side with me and earn some of my divine favor. For the local nobles, it's actually quite a clear choice that I can bring more to the table. Unless Eon permits us marching an army of beetles into our neighbors' lands. Most of our neighbors are economically intertwined with us, so they are in a difficult position. They are mostly smaller nation states or kingdoms, and they do not have a large standing army. Nothing that can stand up to a 300,000 strong crusading army. I paused and wondered, what's the objective of this army? Do all of these 300,000 really share the goals that the gods and temples leadership decided? They probably don't know the true extent of my reach, and so, I've extended subsidiary trees in all directions, even through the lands of these other neighboring kingdoms. I also made subsidiary trees all the way to the port city where most of the crusading forces landed. Most people do not notice trees by the roadside. The port city's packed. It was not the only port to receive the crusading army. These forces are coming through 5 to 6 different port cities and will converge along the way to me. In a way, if I wanted to spring a surprise attack, the best time is when they are still here. There's a lot of idle chatter. A sense that the enemy is still really far away. I still can't believe I sailed across the ocean just to fight a tree. Some of the soldiers said, can't they just send a woodcutter and chop the tree down? I am sure the temple thought of it. It's not just any tree. It's a tree that attained the cursed power of the evil gods. An evil tree god, really? Some of the soldiers seemed baffled by it. I mean, all I've heard of the Freshlands is that this evil tree god has been shielding them from the demons, and suddenly they tell me this magic tree is now evil. Shush, don't let the Templars hear that. Aw, fuck them. I am just here for the money. I am just here because the big boss says so. The soldiers don't seem like they all believe in their cause all that much. It's a shame that wars, being what they are, means we will cross paths, and they will die. From my observation, the composition of the crusading army is roughly similar to a typical army. 90% regulars with soldiers or warrior classes, and 10% unique. It's the 10% I need to pay attention to, for any unusual skills or classes. It's been some time since I had a large-scale fight with other humans. Council. I spoke to the War Council. Reach out to all the neighboring kingdoms and ask for an alliance. If they want to side with the temples, we will declare war and we will invade. If they join us, I will offer them protection. The council did as they were told, and surprisingly quite a few of the kingdoms agreed to form an alliance. They instantly rejected the Crusades' demand for freedom of entry, and I populated the allied kingdoms with my subsidiary trees. Fools, these temples. I have 500,000 beetles I can use in combat, and they regenerate in about 3 to 4 months. But, I need to get their effectiveness up. They've been traditionally geared against monsters and demons, but since I am facing a large-scale war, I need to have additional advantages and perks. Horns. Yes, Master. What sort of anti-army or anti-Templar research do we have? Trevor and Dimitri popped in. We have numerous potential research. We can deploy poison-laced beetles. I want assassin beetles. I said, I want beetles that are able to hunt down their elite SL. Alright, well, get the research started. Horns made a fist pump. It would take a few months, so I'll just drag the battle on. Meanwhile, a few smaller skirmishes broke out. I have not deployed most of my own abilities yet, it's better to keep some of my powers hidden. The less they know about me, the more mistakes they will make. The Valthorns needed some pep talk before every battle, though. They are trained to fight demons and hybrids, so an all-out war against other humans, elves and sentient races still needed some mindset change, even if I had included it in their training regime. If it's not for Jura, I'd have a lot more to worry about. I also had to make sure that the enemy didn't level up too much, especially survivors. Survivors may often return far stronger, and since they survived a fight with beetles, they would gain anti-beetle skills. It's really a case of just killing everyone. I wonder whether there are anti-human or anti-elf skills. They do. Jura said. Such accursed skills exist. This crusade, I feel, was going to drag on for a while. The temples can keep reinforcing the ports. If I want to cut them off, I must march on the ports itself. If I can hold on to the ports, the temples would have to take a long detour. There are 6 ports that are on the side of the temples. Honestly, I think a few of them will fold if we manage to capture 1 or 2 of the port cities. Their loyalty to the faraway temples are tenuous at best. I see. So, again, I am a tree. I can fight wars differently. The enemy, from what I've seen so far, has not been able to detect subsidiary trees. Or at least, they didn't display that they are able to. If I want to end it, I'll have to swiftly capture all 6 port cities in one go. They have some defenses, but nothing too big. And I already have trees all the way into the city. Now, I just need to make sure I have trees in all 6 cities, and I can spring a sudden surprise attack. Therefore, I called on the council and changed the tactics. I wasn't sure whether any of the council leaked information to these crusaders, perhaps unwillingly or unknowingly, so I didn't disclose the full plan. The strategy, simply put, is to delay the crusaders as long as possible. I told them that I would have a way to decisively win, a special weapon. This is partly true. I could deploy my Titan souls against this crusading army, but I feel that's a waste. I wanted to drag it on, because I needed the time to design and research special beetles. Assassin and anti-human beetles that can fight effectively in cities, not just open areas. Spiders too. I had the web spiders, and I figured spiders would operate a lot more effectively in the city area, so I increased research on poisonous spiders. And I created a few more artificial souls for horns. 5 beetles, and 5 spiders. My new insect army commanders. Now that I've leveled up to level 168, and have trees that stretch the entire Freshlands, artificial souls limit is quite high. Sure, I can field a large quantity of these sentient assistants, but they are still no match for elites. They would take a few months, at least, to reach the mid-level 20 to 30s, and before that, their combat strength is mediocre. And so, the plan was on the way. Tunnels were made into all the 6 port cities, and a lot of subsidiary trees were created. I've also created giant attendant trees in the forested locations nearby, and used my camouflage ability to hide them. I would unleash at least 70,000 to 100,000 beetles on each of the 6 cities in one go, effectively cutting off their supply lines. Then, smaller attack forces will strike at the crusading army. Because the crusading army is so large, they are led by multiple generals and lords. It's also a logistical challenge, so the army is split into 2 large groups of about 250,000 each, and a few smaller, 10,000-20,000 contingents. It's entirely dependent on imported supplies and resources, so a targeted attack on its supplies will thin out the force rather quickly. A few of the generals have the ability, create food supply or army skill, reduce hunger or some variation of it. But, the power has a size limit, so a large portion will be outside the effect of the skill, and will therefore desert the army. But, for now, smaller skirmishes. It wasn't time yet. Timing is everything. I am getting a little frustrated. Edna complained after a skirmish with the Crusaders. It was trench warfare, really. I'd reinforce a large segment with walls, and the Crusaders would march on it. They'd fight a bit, but they usually don't make much progress. Me too. I wish I can just charge out there. You'll die, though. I know. There were about 80,000 soldiers on the other side. They were bombarding the walls with rocks and magic, but wooden shields and barriers meant those bombardments weren't making a dent. There's also a thick web of thorns and human-eating plants. They've been using fireballs and all, trying to make a dent at the walls, but with a giant attendant tree at the back, they can take a few hits. This is just a boring stalemate. Edna frowned. Eon wants it that way. Ferris said. And I think the enemy knows it. We should just charge in. The enemy seems to forget that even grass can have ears. And there are roots that can just peek out of the ground just a little bit. Right below the commander's camp. This is a waste of time. The general said we should hold. What for? The general's giving the enemy too much credit. Other than that massive wall, we outnumber the enemy force by 5 to 1. And we have 1,000 elites of at least level 30. Why send us here if we are just playing this waiting game? The commander was a young man. Eager, anxious, and wants to prove himself. He walked a bit, and a thorn gently pricked his leg. A little bit of sap. To stimulate his hormones and testosterone. A hormone-filled mistake, here and there. I command our force to charge in. His body flared up. Hot. Anger. Frustration. The sap merely pushed him off the cliff. Commander, the general said. The assistant and captains tried to say otherwise. I am the commander here. And I say we charge. They charged into a wall of thorns and man-eater plants, while Eonic rangers and archers rained death. They quickly realized the folly of their attack, and retreated. But that mistake cost them 10,000 lives, and none of the defenders. Meanwhile, at another front, I was told to expect large beetle armies. The general was in a large camp, flanked by his advisors. And in all of our intelligence, we've only seen beetle armies no larger than 30,000. Whatever it is, our enemy is hiding its strength, and wants a long-drawn war. Does that mean it wants to test our supply lines? A strategist asked. A long war becomes a test of logistics and resourcing. The general nodded. That makes a lot of sense. Our enemy, as a heretic tree on the very edges of divinity, must have tremendous powers over plants and growth. It must be confident that it can continuously feed its population, so it is not afraid of a long siege. My beetles are just mostly doing hit and run on smaller forces. So it wants to draw it out until the temple decides it's no longer worth it. It expects the temples to pull their funding and supplies. A strategist concluded. A swift attack might be just what it's not prepared for. The general said. But it's rather clear that we can't mount a swift attack either. It's a big piece of land, and even with the general's skills, it's probably too much. We should do a precision strike, then. A group of elites right at the center of the enemy. The general of the coalition of crusaders pondered the idea. I have ancient records to suggest that it won't work. Written by one General Akbar. It's probably a trap. Ancient. 40 years in ancient. It's our best chance. Not if we use our heroic artifacts. Now my ears perked up. The temple has not authorized use of the heroic artifacts. If the temple wants us to slay this heretical evil tree, then we should be allowed to use our heroic items. A heroic weapon can destroy that wall, easy. Ooh, it'll be on the receiving end of a heroic grade item. Now, that's something worth testing out. I am a level 168 tree, can I survive a hit from a hero grade item? Then we must send a request. The general said, outline our observations, insist that a quick victory is ideal, and demand authorization for our hero grade items. The temples have a lot of hero grade items. Items left by previous heroes, or perhaps just claimed by the temple. People like Harris and Mireille even donated some items to the temples too, for political reasons. So the temples, over the years and decades, accumulated a decent stockpile of hero items. Of course, they can't make full use of it, but because they are hero items, they should still pack a strong punch. All I could say was, well, bring it on. Chapter 98 Country Offensive. Year 127. Activating the hero item, the Holy Cannon of Alantera. The Templars shouted. The hero item itself was a small item, but to power it, they had to build a massive array of crystals and mana storage items. The array was 10 times larger than the hero item itself, and that single use broke most of the crystals. The cannon was really just a small shotgun-shaped item. Probably one of the heroes was a gunner or something when they made it. The item glowed, and whoosh, a huge blast of energy shot out towards the walls. I activated 5 Steelwood Barrier. Is this power stronger than the demonic supercannon's long-range attacks? It easily tore through my 5 barriers, and then defensive shields that were already there. Then, that entire section of reinforced wall exploded. Wow, I was impressed. The hero's item really made my wall look like cardboard. So, in short, the demon's attacks had previously failed to break through my defenses because of my innate anti-demonic properties. Against the hero's items, I am blocking it entirely based on stats and levels, and on that front, it's still not enough. Does this mean if Harris or Mireille tried to kill me, they could have succeeded? From this incident alone, I think the answer is yes. They could. They really could. So, I decided I needed an insurance of some kind. Like the grass that regularly regrows after fires scorch the lands, like the plants of the floodplains that respawn after every flood, I decided to extend my roots deep underground. As deep as I possibly could. Then, I put my tree heart there. Even if they chop off my entire tree, as long as my tree heart survived deep underground, I believe I can survive. I also added a big batch of tuberous storage around my tree heart. Like a seed, I have the nutrients and energy from the storage potatoes to respawn should I need to. They won't be using that for a while. Edna said. But we don't know what else they will use. Ferris said, as the Crusaders charged at the hole. The forces quickly retreated to the next defensive point. The temples have a lot of inherited items. But each use is a waste. Edna frowned. Why didn't they use such items against the demons? I am sure they did. They just have a lot of it. Maybe since the heroes were around, they didn't see why they needed to use it, unless they were really desperate. Since the strategy for this entire plan was to delay the enemy as long as possible, there were numerous layers of walls made. Jura came and mentioned his concern. Since the temples are willing to use heroic items, it's possible they may attempt to use an elite force, armed with heroic items to attack you directly. I agree. Of course. There are probably heroic grade teleportation items, or heroic grade stealth items that they can use to attack me directly. The problem, of course, is that their users probably can't fully activate their abilities. Which is why the most heroic items are defensive in nature, because they needed large magical formations and runes to channel power to the heroic items. Unless, there are heroic grade batteries. Which makes a lot of sense. Greater than already. I had hoped this war would last until the next Demon King. Less than. Greater than surely the older races would remember. Less than. Greater than it probably is. Less than. Lilies, again with odd commentaries. I don't recall whether there are any long wars in this world, not anymore, at least. Unless, that war is invisible. Greater than your long wars, is it the demons and the gods? Less than. Maybe. That's a yes, damn it. The Crusaders advanced a little. My forces slowly moved into place. I've had tunnels ready, and I've secretly occupied various little forests near the port cities. Maybe they have a heroic item able to detect me. But still, I wanted to drag it out. See what exactly these temples are able to bring to the battlefield. Dash. This sucks. Edna complained. I don't like being forced to retreat. Her compatriots just rolled their eyes. The Crusaders revealed another hero-grade item. A large bow. They brought an army of mages along to create a runic formation on the ground, and they shot it again. This time, I used 10 steelwood barriers. It still tore through all of them, but at least, it didn't cause my walls to explode. All it did was blast a big hole in the wall. So the magical number is around 10. Or maybe 20. Unless you have a solution for the hero-grade items. Dash. Master. Research on assassin beetles completed. We are working on the flying beetles now. Horns updated, and I quickly started transforming my beetles into their assassin forms. They are smaller, leaner, but with sharp limbs and spikes. They also have poison, and can shoot out a poison horn. Great. Another piece to the puzzle. Eventually, the second layer of walls fell, and the forces retreated. At this point, Jasmine quickly updated that morale was falling, and we needed a small victory to keep the stalemate going. So, the temple used the holy cannon of Alantera again, this time at a fort. It blasted the fort's walls in a segment to smithereens. But it was a ruse. Using root tunnels, I had the army sneak around them, and then, with my new assassin beetles, rushed in for the kill. I would seize the holy cannon of Alantera for myself. There would be no survivors. It was chaos. Perhaps, a slaughter too. 50,000 assassin beetles appeared from the ground, together with the Valthorns and the regular armies. A proper counterattack. The enemy died, and now, I have the cannon. In the chaos, the commander was able to send a distress signal. This is commander of the vanguard force, we're being attacked by new beetle types. The cannon is lost. The cannon is lost. A root strike dismembered him. Dash. The general was a day away, and he got the message. New beetle types. I have an ominous feeling. Well, you should, Mr. General. You're stretching out your supply lines, spreading your men thinner, and when I strike, you won't be able to rush back and save your port cities. Letting the Crusaders push further in was an intentional plot to spread out their men and their elite forces. Even if it seemed like we were losing, only Jura was aware that something was up. When is Eon going to bring out his superweapon? The War Council asked. The new beetles, are those the superweapons? Jura nodded. I believe that's the first of the many weapons Eon plans to unleash. The next weapon are the spiders. I wanted assassin spiders to take control of the cities. The first time the enemy would see it, would be when I attack the cities. Jasmine noted that our morale quickly improved as we have secured the hero item. The generals gathered his advisors. A priest was present, and he read out the statement. The temple has authorized use of more hero items. Looks like the temple is really going for it, but the fact that their ability to power the hero items relies on large arrays means they are so obvious when they are about to be used. Could a small assassin group really sneak in with it? Unless they build the array on site, or use an existing array. But I didn't want to drag it too long. I have been observing them when they used the hero items, and now that I have claimed their hero item, I turned it against them. My mastery of runes meant I too can quickly set up an array, and activated the holy cannon of Alantera against the enemy force. One blast, it drained all the runes, and broke some of the stones and ground that channeled the power. The enemy retreated. That one attack killed probably a few thousand, and it's not even its full power. I decided to try channeling my existing star mana into it. The hero item drained all my star mana easily, and it's so greedy. After it used up all my star mana, it wanted more, and the item easily used up my normal mana too. Did the heroes always have so much star mana? How'd they keep their weapons working? Master, based on my surveillance of the heroes, they have approximately 500,000 to 800,000 star mana each. Jasmine commented. She pulled on her past records of conversations between Harris, Mireille and Gerard. I have 300. No wonder the hero items just drained my star mana like I had nothing. They must be using at least 1,000–2,000 star mana to power the hero items each time. The weapon was now partially charged, and I used it on one of the crusading armies. The explosion was massive, far larger than what it was when powered by regular mana, and still it wiped a quarter of that army. Probably 10 to 20,000 just died instantly. The enemy panicked and then quickly retreated. I am sorry, but death is what it is. I even felt their souls enter my main tree. But I only regenerate star mana by a pitiful amount every day. That meant I couldn't even use the hero's item if I wanted to. My full 300 star mana takes an entire 2 months to regenerate, so the weapon can be used once every 2 months to this level of strength. So it's not as if I could just use the cannon like a machine gun. Despite the enormous destruction caused by the hero cannon, I am fairly certain this wasn't its full strength. Also, the hero items used by the temples, and all the various nobles are inferior to pure hero items, in the sense that they have been made to also work with regular mana. True hero items can only be operated with star mana, and are useless to everyone else. Those pure star mana hero items are superior in output and strength. The army regained a bit of our lost ground, and we managed to retake the outermost walls of the Freshlands. How long more till we research the next upgrade for the assassin beetles? A month, Master. The assassin beetles have not been revealed to our enemies, yet. At least, I hope that they were not detected. The tunnels in my bases next to the 6 port cities continue to expand. I've researched tunneler beetles, and have also commenced research on more types of spiders. The beetles made additional tunnels into the port cities, and I wonder whether the enemy realized it by now. I could tell some of them felt something, at least. The mayor of one of the port towns kept sending miners to dig the ground. He said he felt there's an infestation or something, but he wasn't sure. I had to order the beetles to hastily collapse the tunnels before they were detected. Surely, that mayor couldn't be the only one that possessed such skills. In fact, some of the military leaders we observed clearly had the skill, but they just didn't react to it. I can't help shake off this feeling that we're all walking into a big trap. A commander said to a fellow captain. It's a feeling that's been nagging at me since I landed in this city. Seasickness. I feel like it's my skill. You've had it since the day you landed, and it's been a good 3 months since then. It's funny that one of the ways to beat such alarm skills is to keep scaring them until they stop treating it seriously. Kinda like training one's body to ignore their daily morning alarm. If it's something, it should have happened. The other captain just shrugged. We're doing okay. The heretics are not making progress. That was just one of the many captains that was eventually lulled into a sense of complacency. For the rest of the year, there were smaller battles, but I was still waiting for more beetle upgrades. I wanted my conquest of the 6 port cities to be simultaneous and decisive. I wanted to break the Crusaders once, and end it. Eon, there should be another 400,000 soldiers arriving on our continent. Kavio and the War Council reported. This was in addition to the 500,000 to 600,000 soldiers that were already deployed across the entire battlefront. I wondered why the war doctrine in this world still insisted on throwing numbers at an enemy at first, but eventually I got it. In terms of actual combat, sure, an army of high-leveled individuals can do way more damage than an army of lower-leveled conscripts, but I increasingly believe the temples are intentionally hoping that from a large pool of low-leveled individuals, some gems emerge. It's an interesting tactic. To sieve the gems from the scrap, they send these large numbers to their possible deaths. The Freshlands' own defensive army is about 300,000 strong, conscripted from the massive population of the Freshlands. Yet, that excluded my million-strong beetle and spider army. There are various smaller city-states that decided to side with me, and they volunteered in total, another 60,000 fighters. And so, They send more to their doom. They would outnumber us 3-1 once they land. I believe they may try a decisive strike once they land, to minimize the load on their logistics. One of the hired generals advised. It's funny and rather strange to have generals on my side now, but I am not complaining. They would try this path, I believe. The general pointed to one of the entrances into the Freshlands. Or force a way through this segment of the Rotted Lands. It's a large army, and may end up in a lot of bloodshed. A situation I'd like to avoid, if I can. I wondered whether I should pull my attack at the moment when they land, or after. What is their supply situation? Is their food and accommodation going to arrive before the actual army of 400,000? Trevor tapped into the grand mind, and quickly created a massive overview of the entire battlegrounds. He highlighted all the various supply positions. Master, should we intend to cripple and starve our opponents, we may be able to do so by attacking all these locations. A decisive strike before they land may force them to redirect. The logistics and supplies usually arrive before the army. So the right time to strike is when the 400,000 is still at sea, but their supplies and all have landed. That way, the coming army is forced to deal with a lack of supply. 800 ships, carrying 500 soldiers each. Large galleons of the four temples. I wondered whether my attacks work in water. I think the impact of my route strikes would probably be weakened by the water. How long before they arrive? In 2 weeks. There's a tiny window, when the supply ships arrive just before the army itself. I paused, and I thought. By all the odds, it wasn't ideal. My fully researched assassin beetles were not ready, but if I wanted to cause the most damage, I had to take this window. Ready all the armies. There will be a strike in 6 to 8 days. All mobile units prepare for a long-range strike. That declaration made the entire war council pause, before Jura himself, invited as a translator, mostly, asked on behalf of the war council present. Eon, repeat that, please. Ready all our forces. We will strike in 6 to 8 days. Valthorns will receive specific instructions. About 2,000 of my best Valthorn fighters gathered at a forward base near one of the outer walls. There was 3 giant attendant trees, and it flanked a tunnel that led underground. Briefing time. I announced telepathically, and the Valthorns stood to attention. Edna, Ferris and many other upgraded class holders were there. All of you will be marching into the tunnels. You will be split into 6 groups, and your next orders will be given when you are there. Be prepared for urban combat and a siege, enemies expected to be high level, and large numbers. The order given, they started to board the carrier beetles. The fastest beetles were selected, and they had supplies for a month. The beetles would carry them to their targeted destination in a week. The Valthorns chatted. Are we attacking the nearby forts? The Crusaders had set up numerous advance forts to hold their supplies. These are my targets, but it wouldn't be the Valthorns' target. I had intended these 2,000 Valthorns to coordinate the attack on the 6 port cities. These are my best and most loyal Valthorns, most of them have Eonic variants, such as Eonic Rangers, or Eonic Druids, or Eonic Knights. The beetles will provide the numbers, but I need the Valthorns or the secret sauce, with their higher levels and special skills. 2 days later, I had moved more beetles into various locations near the port cities. 100,000 beetles and spiders at each of the port cities, waiting for the time. Route tunnels made as close as possible, and as many subsidiary trees as I can, in all the places where I could place a tree without raising too many alarms. Eon, what are we doing in 4 to 6 days? The general asked. He noticed the Valthorns were gone. The enemy clearly is behaving strangely, and some of the smaller battalions have attempted to attack our walls. Is there something that was leaked? The enemy was nervous. Their generals and strategists all had some combat sense, and they knew something was happening. They just didn't know what, so some of them just attacked. There was an air of tension. We're preparing for war. Is Eon revealing some superweapon? The Valthorns, what's their plan? What's the enemy up to? I decided to confuse them a little. We will be striking at their fortified locations. The council thought this meant all the nearby forts, and they started to make plans with the resources available to them. I had given them use of 100,000 regular beetles to supplement the regular standing army. On the other side, I detected their discomfort. The generals and strategists all have skills, and so the Crusader generals all increased their scouting efforts, and since there's only 1 week left to the trap, I didn't hesitate to kill their scouts with a root strike, or a poison. Eon's forces are able to kill our scouts this far away from the walls. They have an infiltration force. An assassination squad. They wondered, and increased their guards. They truly were not experienced in fighting against a tree. They assumed my tactics to be similar to regular kingdoms. What's their force projection ability? The generals discussed at first, of the likelihood of a long-range strike from me. They noted it is possible, but they rated the risk as low, since they do not expect that I could field a war significant number of combatants far away. This trap is something I can only pull off once. All these enemies will learn of my tactics, and they will be prepared after this. So, if this trap succeeds, I must hold on to the port cities and deny the temples a chance to regain a landing zone. At least, they would have to land further away, and march a lot further. Still, some of the more paranoid commanders reshaped their forces into defensive formations. The effects of skills are really interesting. Another 2 days, and the supply ships started to land. Some soldiers too have landed, but the bulk of them have not arrived. The small group of soldiers started to set up new tentages and areas, where the newly arrived soldiers will rest, before joining the rest of their armies. Too bad they won't find any place to rest. The Freshland Army cavalry was ready, and the Crusaders were clearly preparing for a cavalry charge. We spotted Freshland cavalries and archers massing behind the walls and cities. They may be preparing for a charge. If they want to strike at us before our reinforcement comes, then let them. In another day, most of the supply ships have arrived, and about 70,000 of the 400,000 additional soldiers have arrived. True, not all will come at the same time, but no matter. Already, some of the soldiers had a bad feeling. I am sorry, but war is a cruel thing. The temples have decided to declare war, and peace was off the table. Perhaps I must display a decisive victory, then only a peace can be negotiated. The Valthorns arrived at their designated locations underground. They've been traveling in the route tunnels for an entire week. Where are we? They were mostly lost. Their sense of time and place is distorted in the tunnels. There are no markers to day-night cycle. They've lived with food pre-packed, or those made by the Eonic druids. They even have special fruits and drinks to help them tolerate the effects of traveling underground for long periods. The 2,000 Valthorns have split up in the underground tunnels to their respective targets. Each group gathered in a small clearing, protected by the camouflage of subsidiary trees. Time to start my second briefing. Once you step out of these forests, will be the port cities of the Crusaders. Our enemies. Rest well, because once night falls, we will attack the port cities. The Valthorns were nervous. With so little of us. No. The beetles and spiders will assist you by the tens and hundreds of thousands. They are hidden throughout the city, and the land beneath you. You will join the battle once they start the attack. They nodded, and I let them soak in the information. I created a few wooden displays of the targeted port cities, and where the weak points are, which they took their time to analyze. They had never participated in a siege before. The Valthorns chatted and planned, and I told them to rest well before nightfall. I gave them all a tree syrup filled with energy nutrients. They'd go into the attack with their full strength, whereas the enemy is exhausted from a full day's work. The moment of fighting finally came. The weather was pleasant in all 6 of the port cities, and the soldiers were all in various stages of sleep. Some were alert, for sure. I had decided to strike in the late evening, as my assassin beetles and poison web spiders benefited from the cover of night. I steeled myself, and sent out the command to all my beetles and soldiers. Generals and commanders, it is time to strike. The first port was home to 200,000, but now it was temporarily home to an additional 50,000 soldiers. As the city itself didn't have enough accommodation, most of the newly arrived soldiers and their support team lived in makeshift housing outside the city itself. That meant they were always vulnerable to subterranean attacks since they didn't have fortified foundations. It began suddenly. Tentages. And their temporary bases collapsed beneath them. Multiple, almost a few hundred holes appeared at the same time, and the beetles rushed out. A well-timed root strike also caught one of the commanders by surprise, wounding him severely, before a beetle finished him off. The soldiers, most feeling safe and comfortable this far away from the front lines, were suddenly jolted into panic. Some of them slept without their weapons, many were not alert at all. The beetles took full advantage and they attacked and killed the enemies by the hundreds and thousands. Attack! We are under attack! The commanders shouted, but their voices were soon silenced by a spider that ran into their mouth. The port itself found its walls broken. Some of them had been magically reinforced, but I had found weak spots after the past few months of planning. There were already tunnels that allowed my spiders and beetles to enter the port city itself. After all, not every city had the luxury of master builders who made thick foundations. The soldiers scattered as loud explosions spread. The Valthorns, too, joined the battle. They rode beetles and rushed for the walls. They focused on the higher-leveled one who managed to react and fight. Assassin beetles were more than a match for the level 10 to 20 soldiers, but if the enemy soldiers were level 30 to 50, it would require the Valthorns to effectively disable them. A mage ran and tried to send a message, but an arrow went through his head. He collapsed. Ionic rangers and archers. The 50,000 soldiers quickly thinned to only 20,000 to 30,000 that fled, and the port city itself was flooded by beetles and spiders. As a statement, the beetles dug up one of the squares, and I made a giant attendant tree right in the middle of it. The giant tree all emitted a healing aura and magic suppression aura, which made my beetles a lot more hardy. Then an explosion went off. Master, a group of mages just activated a hero item. Right in the middle of the port city, it created a summoned giant fire elemental and it started attacking the beetles. My beetles couldn't get to that group in time. Thankfully, with my giant attendant tree right in the city, it was rather easy to just launch constrict. My vines can take a bit of fire, and they can ensnare magical creatures since 50 years ago. They can even drain mana. So it's perfect for summoned fire elementals. The vines latched on, and gradually, the struggling fire elemental shrunk until eventually it was extinguished. Shit. The mages cursed and fled. The magical item summoned more fire elementals, but I had a lot of vines, and these fire elementals were pitiful. Had they been summoned with star mana, they may be worth taking seriously. Most cities had some military resistance, but nothing I couldn't really handle. So, progressively I captured more and more artifacts and treasures. They had higher level units too. A general here, a commander there. Some master swordsmen too, who cut through my army of assassin beetles like nothing. But as my beetles or the Valthorns distracted these masters, a vine would occasionally ensnare their legs, and they would find themselves weakened, poisoned. The beetles would then deliver the knockout punch. Once we got a strong foothold in the city, and my beetles have seized most of the key locations, I would telepathically speak to everyone in the city. Surrender, or we will kill you. The Valthorns, like Edna and Ferris, would then help to coordinate and communicate with the captured and surrendered civilians. The port city fell by end of the day, civilians all under home quarantine as beetles patrolled the streets, and the enemy forces all corralled into the squares. My main focus was ensuring that the port was no longer operational. I still don't have flying beetles, but some of the jetties and docks were made of wood. So, it was easy to destroy them. Whatever supplies they had was quickly hauled away by beetles. Even if they managed to dock at one of the jetties made of stone, they would immediately have to fight beetles and spiders. A similar chain of events repeated in all the other 5 port cities. All of these cities have magical defenses and high-level individuals, some more than others. In one city, the Valthorns had to deal with a group of master pyromancers, and in another, a group of expert axemen. Without healing aura and the element of surprise, the losses would have been a lot higher. The soldiers, as ragtag as they are, were quite good once they found their weapons. Most were around level 20, so they could go toe-to-toe with one beetle in a straight fight. Still, the element of surprise, coordinated strikes at all 6 port cities and multiple other supply locations easily overwhelmed their ability to respond properly. Some of the soldiers retreated. Skilled ones too, they had the right instincts to respond correctly. But sometimes, even doing things perfectly leads to failure. One of the port cities experienced constant combat till midnight, with long fights throughout the day. They had a few platoons of very well-trained soldiers at least level 30 to 50. For them, the Valthorns fought hard, and I had to frequently assist them with my vines to prevent any unnecessary Valthorn deaths. 2,000 elites meant only about 300 to 400 Valthorns per city. A small number of elites on my side, against whatever elites the temples have. I had to protect them. They are an investment into my future. I had vision, and I had beetles. So the Valthorns would usually attack from an advantage. I would never let them be wastefully sacrificed. They are crucial to my longer-term plans. We are the trees, the anchor of the ecosystem, but the ecosystem must have other moving parts. I see the Valthorns as a key part. Nearer to the various crusading armies, surgical strikes that targeted their supply chains popped up everywhere. It hit at their tents, destroyed their food. Spiders that poisoned their water. For the Crusaders, this was their first brush with assassin beetles that popped out of the ground. The Crusaders had 2 large 200,000 strong forces, split across 2 large campsites. We didn't attack them much, just little hit and run attacks. It was intentional. I had hoped that a portion might break off and try to rescue the port cities. I chewed through the smaller forces easily. For larger armies, the element of surprise was not as effective. If they could keep themselves calm and hold the entire force together, they'd survive. Their generals, startled awake by the sudden onslaught of messages and calls, actively tried to reassess the situation. All our port cities have been captured. The supplies have been stolen. It wasn't hard for beetles to haul away goods. That's part of their regular peacetime duties. We'll be out of food in a week with the ports out of commission. We must rush back to retake one of the ports. Furious discussions broke out, some pushing to retreat to the ports, others recommending a push against freshlands. The paths have been cut off. I am a tree. Terraforming terrain isn't exactly difficult. I could easily add trees to a path, and populate them with hostile vegetation. Then add beetles. Instant terrain difficulty +1. Trevor and my artificial minds have been planning for months on how to knock out all their transport routes overnight, and leave only smaller, less useful paths. Even vast plains had tunnels collapsed in order to create a cliff. How? That was a word that gave me joy. I felt like a master strategist who finally revealed his trump card, and the generals were my victims. Monster trees. Monstry. That's a bad pun. In a period of about a week, the balance of power switched. Their entire logistics network and supply chain crippled. The general could probably beat the Freshland force in a straight fight, but I would never fight them that way. I always wanted a subtle way. There was a saying, if one is to remove weeds, they must also remove the roots. I think these ports are the roots. I was going to drag it out until they starved, and even if the general was a good one, a starving army still represented a significant weakness. No amount of skill would suppress widespread hunger. Maybe a level 100 general could, but I think the enemy general was in their level 60s only. Meanwhile, the Freshland army finally got their marching orders, and they soon encountered the deserters and those who fled from my army of beetles and spiders. No army was going to hold itself together when food and water ran out. Some segments of the two crusading forces broke off and they marched towards the nearest city in hopes of securing some supplies. But morale dropped quickly as they encountered terrible, unforgiving terrain that was never there previous, and the two large armies fractured, as each force wanted to seek out their own sources of food. The generals and lords, priests tried to hold the army together, but ultimately, they were a coalition army. The temples cobbled the force together from the armies of various kingdoms. There was never true unity or proper discipline. Once they fractured, it was a lot easier for the Freshland army and my beetles to pick off the smaller forces. Many surrendered. Many soldiers did not have a personal stake in this conflict, and were not blind zealots. Within a month from that day, both of the army's leaders decided to surrender, while the 300,000 or so soldiers that were unable to dock had to forcefully redirect themselves to further ports, with whatever little supply they carried. There, their crusade stopped. The first crusade against Eon had ended. I lost about 200,000 beetles from the 1 million deployed across the 6 cities and various smaller targets. Horns and my new artificial minds all leveled up quite significantly from the battles. You gained a level. You were level 169. Subsidiary trees limit increased to 1,500,000. Of course, this sudden upheaval made my war council angry, frustrated. Eon had planned to take the 6 port cities all along. The general said, we were the distraction from the main attack. And it didn't tell us because we might leak it to the temples, so Eon just let us drag the war out. Jura earned a bit of sounding, but Jura himself had very little knowledge of the actual plan, other than there is one. In fact, he knew of the plan to attack all 6 port cities at the same time I announced it to the Valthorns. A victory. But the crusade was not over, not yet. The temples remained formally at war, so this was pretty much just the first crusade. I made sure research continued into more types of beetles and spiders. I would want to add flying beetles, and bomber beetles. I'd like to bomb the ships once they got in range of the shore. There's also the political complexity of assimilating the 6 port cities into the Freshlands administration, and the negotiations with the nations and kingdoms in between. Those that had chosen to side with the temples, quickly switched sides, when they watched the port cities fall. All of them also fortified their walls and reinforced their foundations, to make it harder for tunneling. Politically, the 6 port cities are now a part of Freshka. I declared that since they declared war on me, I have, by the norms of this world, properly conquered the port cities. Something none of the kingdoms dare oppose, even if they privately mentioned their worries. Some of them got so paranoid that they chopped all the trees from their cities. Treeless cities. Enemies. I declared cities without trees as enemies of the freshlands. The few small city-states that made such a decision surrendered in fear. All in, by the end of the year, we had conquered 6 port cities, and 8 other kingdoms. Many expressed their regrets for siding with the temples. I had initially considered being more iron-fisted and considered executing their leaders, but decided to demand resources, gems and various other treasures as compensation. Throughout the new kingdoms that now come under my influence or indirect control, I thought of expelling those who sided with the temples, but instead opted for a widespread conversion program. Like a forest reclaiming urban lands, I can convert them. I would try. Walalo. Most priests in this world are not specific to a god, though some do specialize, and in doing so, gain special classes for that god. But in most part, the priests of the world are generally polytheistic, and it's a mishmash of the pantheon and whatever local animistic belief that existed in a particular location. It was this tolerance of various beliefs that allowed me to recruit some of my earlier batch of priests. The world had spirits after all, and unlike home, the priests of this world acknowledge that each god has a focused scope, and at times, local spirits will reign over the wills of the gods. In a way, it is strange that the gods outright declared a crusade against me. Why? They've shared the world with so many others, so what's wrong with just letting me rise? Why a crusade? Why send an army and so many lives to waste when there are demons to prepare for? Why? What's this insanity? It's my first time seeing the ocean. Edna said. She had lived inland. The Freshlands itself is landlocked. After all, the corruption bomb happened in the middle of the continent. Little did I imagine for my first time, I'd be part of a covert army conquering a port city. Fate is strange, Edna. A fellow Valthorn nodded. There were a few deaths. I couldn't save everyone, but a few deaths are still infinitely better than many. The losses on the opponent's side is far larger, and the beetles gathered the surrendered soldiers into groups. More of the regular army and cavalry had marched all the way from the Freshlands to reinforce the Valthorn strike team, including various local nobles and captains. They had a lot to do, like stripping the surrendered soldiers of all their weapons, briefings, taking over the military administration. There would also be officials from the Freshlands Federal Authority. They had to set up offices to integrate these new cities into the Freshlands. Formally, the 6 cities were declared to be the Freshland 6 ports, and they would have a sub-authority known as the 6 Ports Administration. It made sense that all 6 ports were administered together, even if all 6 were previously independent states. Quite a few of the existing administration surrendered, and Kavio recommended that we assimilate them into the existing structure, once they passed some loyalty test. A suggestion I agreed, but a lot of new people had to be parachuted over. It's kind of like when a company forcefully acquired another company. Some of the employees would remain, but usually the heads of department would change. There would be a lot of system changes and migrations. Laws and processes need to be modified to comply with the new acquiring holding company. You'll get sick of the ocean soon enough, Lady Edna. A soldier said. The Valthorns are a sub-nobility, so they are often referred to as Lady or Lord, even if they do not formally carry the title. Indeed. Edna nodded. She was in the southernmost port. But for now I'll enjoy it. There were wreckages to clean up. Holes to patch up. Most of the civilians had private complaints about the new, giant attendant tree, that now dominated their city, but they soon accepted that they lost, and the tree is there to remind them that we will watch over them. The Valthorns would be stationed there for at least a few years as a peacekeeping force, with regular rotations back to the Freshlands. A long-range beetle transport service was set up, and the kingdoms in between happily gave permission. It's not as if they dared oppose me at this point. Most of the nations swayed with the wind, and changed allegiances. Like new converts, they compensated for their foolish past by insulting their temples with vigor and vitriol. It's fine. Geopolitics is disgusting, but ultimately necessary. There is no way I can populate the land without people, and people naturally give rise to politics. After the battle, I created more artificial minds. I had to. My lands and dominion had increased so much more, and Jasmine and the existing artificial minds could not handle the monitoring of so many new citizens. I also didn't expel those who believed in the 4 warring temples, I only demanded that they do not support any war effort against me. But that required my artificial minds to observe so many of these cities and kingdoms. Intense monitoring and surveillance is required. Why not kill them? My artificial minds suggested. After all, we have killed so many. I didn't want to, though. But I felt comforted too. This is a part of nature. In nature, death is perpetual. Do we weep for the millions of ants who died in their wars with each other? Do the ant queens cry when the super ant colonies wage planetary warfare? No. Grand Mind Tree has blocked influence from trees. Override. Death on a personal level is a tragedy. But in the wars I fight, they are but a statistic. A number. A score at the end of the game. A tree in its life would create thousands, even millions of seeds. All potential lives. It does not weep when mortals eat the seeds. It is part of a greater calculation. That some will survive, and as a whole, we will all prosper and grow. Pain and death is but a step. Wait, I am going too far. No. I paused and pulled myself together. Indeed, but they surrendered. As such, I must abide by the norms of those who surrendered, that they are not overly punished. I cannot go too deep at that end. I would become a pest, a locust. A tree of nature must never let itself turn into plague that destabilize the ecology. But they may well go against you, Master. I must mold the narrative correctly. I seek to change and prepare, but I must look to be constructive, not overly destructive. Even if I do use tools which are destructive. A risk, but a calculated one. Only by displaying mercy and the willingness to assimilate these people, these heathens that they once were, can we convince the world that we are here to stay. If one of every two converts to our cause, we are stronger as a whole. The risk is worth it. To build a stronger tree, we must sometimes accept some risks. The artificial minds mentally agreed. They would agree anyway. So, we watch. 50 new artificial minds. My second, Grand Mind Tree, will take 18 months to be completed. The various surrendering kingdoms gladly volunteered the materials for its construction. They didn't know, of course. I merely asked for the materials, and the losers gladly coughed it out. It will be long. Those who lost will nurse unhappy feelings. I only hope that we pick them up before. Those unhappy feelings lead to more war and conflict. The temples started a war, but I have no intention of letting this crusade last for centuries, even if I am very much suited for a long war. Greater than relatively. Less than. Lily's had not participated in the war. In fact, Lily's city didn't send soldiers out at all, even though their city was home to many followers of these temples. Ha! Was that a pep talk from Lily's? Greater than if only it wasn't so. Less than. Greater than so it is. Less than. Chapter 99 TreeTree. Year 128. A year of relative peace, though publicly, we are still at war. It's kind of like the whole South-North Korea situation. No one wants to back off and sue for peace, and yet the temples need time to rebuild their military force. Nearby, none of the neighboring ports wanted to host the crusading armies, lest a similar incident unfolded. Fear crept into the hearts of many kingdoms, that suddenly a giant tree appeared in the middle of a faraway city, and overwhelmed a tide of beetles and spiders. The giant attendant trees, they towered in the 6 cities, as symbols of the crusade's foolishness. The giant attendant trees were so large that they could be seen from the boats and ships far from shore. But our own informants indicated that the temples are mustering another force. Why? In the meantime, the victory has made the Freshlands Federal Authority extremely busy. They spent a lot of time reallocating people and implementing a ton of new rules. A lot of the prisoners of war were made to do hard labor, or farm work, but some were released to those kingdoms that surrendered. A long set of agreements and treaties, to secure the shifting allegiances of the kingdoms and nations sandwiched between the Freshlands and the 6 ports. I did not care very much for the regular prisoners, so I was happy to let them go. These were mostly low-ranking soldiers, mostly under level 30, their threat level was not that significant anyway. The loyalties of many conscripted soldiers are suspect anyway. Most of them just obey their kings and rulers, and may not truly believe in the cause. A heretic god. What does it have to do with me? It's a common expression amongst the soldiers. I am here because the king sent me. Quite a fair bit don't even know what they are fighting, they only know they have been instructed to invade the Freshlands. I suppose it's rather difficult to ensure the correct messages are transmitted to the 500,000 to 1 million soldiers caught in the conflict. Especially in a world where messages frequently still travel by mouth. Messages and magical spells remain a luxury of the elite class. What does it feel like, to cause the death of so many? Strangely, it was a prayer from a random citizen of the Freshlands. He made the prayer some time after the armies surrendered. Do gods treat us mortals as just playthings? I think so. The gods certainly do. And I see why. If the gods can disassociate the person from the body, that means to them, each living person is nothing more than a gamer holding an avatar, and when they die, it's just game over for that avatar. It's like humans with our games. Many certainly think it is weird to care when our avatars die. Most just sigh, and just start a new game, with a new avatar. But for those living in the moment, they don't know that, and even if they know, they don't feel that connection to those future new lives. Each life and death is not connected to the next reincarnation. Maybe I am also starting to think that way. I should not. It's a flaw. Dash. The War Council met daily. There were always new things to discuss. Kingdom A switched sides. Kingdom B switched sides. Kingdom C demands for so and so. Kingdom D goes this and that. After a while, it's like little notifications in my in-game menu that I've gradually gotten better at ignoring. Especially if it doesn't require my action. It's like some corporate paper pushers who receive hundreds to thousands of emails a day, mostly CC ed. That corporate drone would click on the email, read the first few sentences, notices that he didn't need to do anything, and click delete, or archive. Trevor, can you notify me if any of these daily meetings have something material? Certainly, Master. Trevor answered. You may want to direct your focus on the beetle and spider research. We are making progress, but we do require your decision on the numerical allocation of beetle types. Horns. Update. I mentally called out. Master. Horns shouted with gusto. I wonder how he does it. We have successfully unlocked bomber beetles. We can further advance this into explosive beetles, and also upgrade its range and damage. Each will require 1 to 2 years, and additional resources. Trevor interrupted. Which will not be a problem. We have secured means of collecting the necessary resources from our vassals. We can afford to undertake all of the research. It's a matter of allocation that required Master's attention. Yes. Trevor's right, Master. But I must talk about beetles. We also have made progress on flying beetles and also improved our existing beetles' jumping strength. Our assassin beetles are able to leap twice as far, and our tunneler beetles can last twice as long. Well, that's great. Reality is, all these upgrades do add to utility, even if its combat strength is mostly unchanged. Wait, why do I need to decide on allocation? The process of transforming a beetle from one variant to another is a long process, and the subsidiary trees need about 2 to 3 months to shift from one form to another. 90% regular beetles. I have no intention of alerting our opponents to our unique beetle variants. For the remaining 10%, can I ask for them to be split equally to all different types? Horns intervened. Master, we also have hybrid beetles. Based on your advances in demonic hybrid botany, we are also able to see some potential in demonic corruption-tolerant beetles. Do you want us to research those, even if they are ineffective against humans? Why not, but no allocation of beetles to them. Jasmine also commented. Master, there may be significant value in small beetles that can operate as stealth units. That's what assassins are for. Assassin beetles are still quite large, at the moment. Master, Jasmine is right. We must have all kinds of beetles. Horns nodded. Can we undertake all of them? I felt like I was dealing with children. All right. Trevor, do we have resources for all the research? And sufficient artificial minds to work on each and every one of these research without interfering with our operations? Yes, Master. If you may create a few more. All right. Power is really not the problem now. All in, I can power a good 120 artificial minds. The entire Freshlands, a massive space, is home to around 2 billion normal trees, and 10 to 12 billion shrubs. The conversion of empty land into large forests has been rapid, spurred on by Trevor and the other artificial minds' dedicated and constant expansion of forests. They were persistent and relentless, and the forests grow so quickly that the Freshlands is a woodworking mecca. Housing was commonly made of wood, because of its abundance in the Freshlands, and there were a lot of vegetarians. The Freshlands as a whole had a lot of food supply, particularly grain and fruits, and many of the city-states export their food as one of their key sources of income. That meant there was always a natural place for the 6 ports in the Freshlands, and many merchant lords quickly jumped on the opportunity. Skip intermediaries and additional middleman taxes. They lobbied for a flat Freshlands tax instead, since the goods would be exported out of Freshland-owned ports. Cavio, in one of his many briefings, spoke of the intense resistance and trade disruptions as a result of this war. We still have trade, but the temples have implemented multiple blockages at sea. They have sanctioned privateer groups to sack ships affiliated or carrying goods from the Freshlands. I am a tree. How am I supposed to attack ships out at sea anyway? My beetles too have an operating range, limited by my trees. I cannot send them far out to sea, nor are they suited for it. The ocean is really a massive wall for me, unless I am able to research seagoing plants. Lilies would probably do well at sea, at least, better than me. They are a lake-bound existence, surely the open sea wouldn't be that much of a stretch. We'd have to have our own navy. Which I agreed wholeheartedly. We'll have to start from scratch, since as a landlocked realm, we've never had to have a proper navy beyond our river boats. A navy. But how do I fix our economy that's disrupted? High-level individuals would usually not have problems. Wait, I can create upgraded classes. I can create upgraded trade classes. I totally could create upgraded trade and crafting classes and supercharge the economy. If so, I should totally start doing it. Kavio. What class are you? Me. Kavio the centaur shifted uncomfortably. I am a manager and a trader. With some classes in diplomat and counselor. It's an odd mix. I see. Total levels. Around 60, but it's rather spread out, so I am honestly quite weak. Kavio said. Jasmine whispered into my mind. I believe he also has classes in smuggler. He's been observed smuggling certain mind-altering substances for nobles. In fact, Master Jura also helps to procure the calming teas and psychotic leaves for Kavio. When did that happen? In the past few years. The substances help to calm the minds, apparently very popular with the leadership of the FFA. They say it helps deal with their anxieties and stress from interacting with you, Master. I paused. I caused my supposed leaders to have mental breakdowns and anxiety. Oh wait. That was my intention. I wanted them to be afraid of me, right? This is the natural consequence of that. Inevitably, some will turn to drugs for assistance. I felt conflicted. It was right for them to be afraid of me, for them to be druggies, that certainly was not the outcome I intended. I checked my massively growing pile of skill seeds and class seeds. My soul collectors constantly bring these back to me, on top of the other class seeds I received when my Eonic priests perform funeral rites for the dead. I have all those class seeds. Even smuggler. I could make upgraded versions of them. A simple formula I discovered, really, is to just mash 20 to 30 of the same class together, and it becomes an upgraded version. Sometimes 20, sometimes 30. Some needed 40. Classes that had to do with ruling over others, or were faith-related were a bit more tricky. They sometimes worked, sometimes they didn't. I haven't quite figured it out why, or what. Perhaps there is an underlying mechanic to their upgrades. Is there something, Eon? Kavio asked. He looked really nervous. How is the economy of the Freshlands? Kavio paused, and he looked extremely puzzled. Was jumping from classes to the economy too big a mental leap to make? He stood. If you desire a more complete and precise report, Eon, I would need to gather some of the merchant lords and administrators. But largely, trade with the regional kingdoms is holding up. We have a healthy supply of food, though we are still working on distribution and allocating. The Valtrian Order is committed to distributing food and aid to the poor and those affected. Financially, the Order and the FFA has committed huge amounts of money to rebuild the lands destroyed in the last 2 years of war. Jasmine, my Sky Eye and Spymaster intervened. Master, should you ever desire a report on transaction numbers, you may actually ask us. We monitor the region and we have in-depth insights into the number of wagons moving from place to place, the population size and the general health. There is no need to speak to the centaur. I nodded but rebuffed her. I appreciate your statistical input, Jasmine, but I believe when it comes to qualitative measures of trade, I must consult Kavio and the citizens. Indeed, Jasmine's data is like a satellite system that tracks trade movements, but in terms of value and quality, that's a more subjective measure. Jasmine's ability to provide insight in whether a corn tastes well, or where the market trends are, is quite limited. Even if she and the artificial minds have a wealth of data. I have heard of the FFA's plans to rebuild and integrate the defected nations. But tell me, from your view, how does it go? Kavio paused. It's complicated. We honestly don't know how much we can trust these defected nations, so even if we have contracts and all, enforcement of those contracts is suspect. The alternative is maintaining military presence so they don't try anything funny, but that is treated as a sign that we do not trust them. So, that sows future discontent and unhappiness. Ah, I see. How do we peacefully and successfully integrate an enemy nation? One that fought wars against us. How can a population that lost their loved ones against me, choose to even side with me? Time, trade and communication. Juris' recommendation, using his perspective as a warlord. I think it's a diplomat aspect that's merged into it. Time, really. Time will heal the wound, and we would have to encourage a constant flow of people to and fro those countries. Kavio agreed, of course. I agree, those are commonly understood principles for long-term integration, but we still have to deal with the short-term bumps. It remains that each kingdom has a cultural difference, and they want to maintain their pride. They have defected, but they do not want to be seen as subservient, even if they are, in substance, forced to be. It's a difficult balancing act. I had to pause to unpack that. Essentially, for the 6 ports, the FFA formally annexed those ports as new territories of the FFA. But, for the kingdoms and nations in between, that formerly sided with the temples, they surrendered or switched sides. So, their status is a lot more ambiguous as, although they are on our side, they are not my servants. As such, they have every right to resist my attempts to integrate them into the wider Freshlands community, as they feel as that's me attempting to encroach on their sovereignty. It's like some countries trying to force its allies to learn its language. Sure, they are allies, but don't shove your culture down my throat. Even if these allies were formerly affiliated with my enemies. We're talking about kingdoms, nations. I could crush them. I could, if I need to. But it has not reached that point. In the jungle, a species would have to find a niche to survive, and an ecosystem needs each other. I would like to build an ecosystem where these nations can exist, in a framework. Many resist the FFA's framework. One where I sit at the top as the spiritual overlord of all the vassal states. A few agreed, mostly those nearer and weaker. They were willing to accept me, a strange, magical being, a monster, as their supreme overlord. Most want their own dignity. Might makes right. The world has no overarching enforcer of laws, as much as the gods pretends that they are. Some of them still believe in their own strength. I ended the briefing, and with Jasmine, surveyed my lands. The quality of the FFA's soldiers' equipment is average. Not better than those of my opponents. I had thought I've made arrangements for their equipment to be upgraded. And from my surveys, it seemed that, yes, there were higher quality items in the mix, but ultimately, there was a volume issue. I wasn't aware we did not have skilled blacksmiths. I asked Kavio. We do. But the quantity of high quality goods our masters can make is limited. Certainly not enough to arm 300,000 soldiers. And the quality of our metals have been inconsistent. But they are trying. Why was I not made aware of this issue? There was an awkward silence. It's an ongoing process of renewing our forces' equipment. And there's also the issue of channeling the higher quality output to the Valthorns, who consume these higher quality equipment at a higher rate. But I've already given them my wooden-made weapons. I spent a little more time observing my Valthorns and noticed that they treat my wooden-made weapons with unnecessary respect, using them only on missions that I've personally ordered. On their general duties they've used regular steel weapons. Even though I told them to treat them as expendable, they certainly still used them very, very sparingly. They mostly use them only against demons, due to their anti-demonic effects. Against regular monsters they would equip regular weapons. My spymaster updated. Again, had I been so focused on the big picture stuff that I did not notice how things decayed. I think there's an expectation gap, in that when I give a command, I expect it to be carried out consistently and constantly. But what I am observing is that for the citizens of the Freshlands, they would forget the orders and commands I gave a few years ago, or there's a change of guard and the commands previously set out were not properly passed down. It's not a surprise that the enthusiasm and obedience to orders and commands decayed. It would be strange if employees remembered everything their bosses said since many years ago. So for the general populace, this bureaucratic drift should have been expected. I recalled my own experiences working in that indie company. It was common to forget discussions and decisions that were made as we were busy with our own parts, especially if they seemed inconsequential at that time. We never forget, Master. Trevor said. Indeed, my artificial minds resemble AI more than actual people, and as such they remember my orders even from long ago. Things like overlays, constant expansion of forests. All made possible because my artificial minds almost never stop once an order is given. But people do. It is perhaps also why they are able to change. Because when one is not shackled by their past decisions. I looked at the Freshlands as a whole, and wondered, do they need more change, or more order and tradition? I checked my classes. I have pirate classes, probably from some of them who died. Captain and sailor classes too. I could make upgraded versions of these classes, if I wanted to start a navy. But, how do I control them? Once they are on ships, out on the open waters, I can't monitor them at all. My trees do not have vision in the ocean. What if those with upgraded classes defect, with my ability to supervise so lacking? Trust. Eon. Unfortunately, that is the best we have. I sighed. I have gotten quite used to being able to monitor those who serve me, at least directly or indirectly via my artificial minds. Now this requires me to let go. I feel a little strange. Trust. That's an extremely heavy word. It's especially if the class I am creating is a pirate. Pirates, do they have strong respect for authority? Pretty sure they do have some respect for authority, especially if they have good captains. I merged the pirate and captain classes together and noticed that 5 of each, combined, turned into a pirate captain class. I could create a pirate captain, but would they be loyal? They wouldn't. The best I could do is to somehow align our interests. But sponsoring piracy against the temples is also not something the neighbors will desire. Though I once vowed to avoid the game of politics, the fact that I have power and territory, and neighbors, make me a player in this game. Politics is unavoidable. I cannot avoid people forever, unless I do not care of the decisions other nations make and their consequences on me. Where should I go with this? I wanted a cultural victory. Which sectors need it the most? Blacksmiths and navy. Smugglers to break the temple navy's blockade. Master farmers. The freshlands need to be strengthened and reinforced such that the overall quality of life and the quality of goods are higher than the rest. Better adventurers, less monsters. What's the best way for me to distribute these upgraded classes among the population, such that they aid the freshlands? Based on our surveillance of the population. Master. Perhaps the Titans would be useful. I nodded. I wanted to know how my people tick. I may not predict what decisions they make once they are in the open waters, or outside my domain, but the best I can do is screen them, vet them and interview them properly. I took one of the Titan souls, and nodded. Commencing fusion of Grand Mind Tree and the Titan frame. Upgrading and unlocking of Tree over Mind will take a few months. Chapter 100 Tree Expressway. Year 129. A moment I long awaited, and I felt it happen quite clearly. The tree over mind was shaped like a massive blob of neurons at first, but once it was complete, it shrunk to the size of a small bush. But, anyone who saw it would be able to tell it is no ordinary bush. It was as if a thundercloud was plucked out of the sky and made into a bush. Lightning jumped from one part to another constantly. Flashes of light happened regularly. If not for various other strange, burning trees, it'll look very out of place. I am awake, Master. I am the tree over mind, and I can now be given a name. Telepatrick. Patrick. I had spent some time thinking of what would be a good name. It was either Telepatrick or Psychiatrist. But I decided Patrick would be a more common name. Activating local area, mind access. Patrick said, and my mind was assaulted by the thoughts of almost everyone in Freshka. Freshka was the nearest town to the valley. A lot of people suddenly jerked when they felt that mind access happen. It's like a sudden headache. Jura was quick to detect its presence. Eon. Did something happen? I felt my mind was suddenly touched. The mind access felt quite like a version of the memories that the souls have. When the dead souls arrive in my soul realm, and after 3 additional colors to my soul forge, the quality and quantity of memories I can see from the dead has increased over that time. This was a very similar feeling. I can feel little bubbles of thoughts. Not everything, quite surely. That was when I could feel Juris worry. He was wondering whether that feeling was a mental attack. It was the same throughout Freshka. Ferris was back in Freshka after a stint at the 6 ports, and he felt it too. Those who are higher level can feel it, something touching their mind. They don't know what, though. A deluge of random thoughts. Stupid things. Patrick, can you filter those that are irrelevant? Define irrelevant, Master. Anything that doesn't have to do with me. Everything has to do with you, Master. Eventually. Please narrow down your choice. Exclude thoughts about love lives, friendships, and issues of sanitation, food. What else could I exclude? Or more like, what should I focus on? Or is it better that I go about this in a machine learning way? So, Patrick spent quite a bit of time with me, as we went through the thoughts of the people around me, grading those thoughts using a not interested versus interested criteria. He would develop a framework of what would be relevant to me. But of course, this required training data. So I was swamped with random, silly thoughts for a long time, because though he had my knowledge, he still needed my decision making to properly assess what would be relevant to me. Most of the thoughts are mundane. Thoughts about family, about their work, about food. I wasn't interested in things like that. I wanted things that were a risk. There was a context to it too. Like, I would be interested in more mundane things from Jura, than a random person I don't know. But you do know them, Master. Jasmine added. We have knowledge about so many people. It is just a thought away. Ah, it's weird. It's like one moment you don't know them, and the next, all this knowledge gets downloaded. It's uncanny and weird. So weird. For a human. But so natural for them. Trees take forever to get to know a person. For us, interacting with a person for a year is good enough to make us relate to that person, and makes him feel like we're good friends or sworn enemies. For a tree, 1 year's interaction is probably just a one-liner in the story of their incredibly long life. Yvonne was giving a talk to the new batch of Valthorns. So, don't feel discouraged and wonder why Eon still treats you like he doesn't know you. I believe this is actually a common feeling across all of us normal mortals, when we interact with ageless creatures. There's actually a segment or class in their curriculum called Interacting with Ancient Spirit Trees. Apparently Gerard helped them with the syllabus when he was here, and was mainly for those who had a druid specialization. Druids must learn how to manage spirit trees. They are the creatures of the land, given power by their age or special events. The theory of how spirit trees came to be is complicated, and as druids, it is best not to presume each of their origins. According to one rare ancient script, spirit trees used to be far more common. This, of course, is a highly contentious statement. A young boy raised his hand. His name was Erin, and he's a 10-year-old druid. Why? The ancient script implies that there was an era before the constant destruction and war. If you believe this, then the theory that many trees surviving and achieving sentience would be true. But do we know whether it's true? No. Other than one rare ancient script, we have no other descriptions of spirit trees from the old era. Many records were lost to the numerous wars and battles. It could well be that this ancient script is a story of fiction, as this script was incomplete. Or the work of a speculator or troll. Most of the more recent great druids, or archdruid, believe that spirit trees are not created by the age of the trees, but more of unique magical circumstances. That would be fair. Like me. I am not an old tree, just unique. For example, records about Eon did not exist prior to 50 to 60 years ago, when Frika was founded. Yvonne said. Where was Eon before that? We did not know. So close. Perhaps, he was just asleep. Yvonne obviously didn't think so, but she didn't know the answer. I vaguely sensed she's still trying to unravel this mystery, and I discovered that it's been something she has been wondering for some time. It's just that no one knew the answer, and all Jura told her was that I was brought here by some druids. Maybe it's just magic, made real. Another boy said. He believes in magic, that it is possible for magic to take the form of things. It's a remarkably pure view of magic. And I felt embarrassed when I felt the part of that boy's thoughts, that I am a magical existence. It was weird and jarring to encounter these kinds of emotions. It's like being on the receiving end of a confession. Weird. It's not all positive. Many do view me as a tyrant, a benevolent dictator. These thoughts were common among the visitors to Freshka. Merchants or traveling nobles. Many mixed views about me, most, a grudging respect. On a day-to-day though, most of them don't really think about me that much. Their focus is mostly on their immediate issues. Food, trade, jobs, safety, relationships. Mundane stuff that I mostly filter out. For those who are used to Freshka, or have lived here for a long time, their issues relate mostly to jobs, studies, relationships, happiness, progression and justice. Safety wasn't much of a big deal, because Freshka's extremely well fortified. We have built many, many walls, and the Valthorns' tremendous presence meant safety was not something they thought about. Naturally, I've used my new mind reading, though it's not pure mind reading. It's like I am able to access little thought bubbles that leak out of their minds. It's a bit like Sims, where there's little blobs over their head indicating their thoughts. I've looked through the memories and I believe this display would be most consistent with the present layout. Patrick said. Do you want me to present their thoughts in other forms? I can also arrange them as a ticker-style display, or a live thread. This is fine. Can you color code it for the type of thoughts? Mundane ones as a pale gray. War or combat related as red. Patrick instantly revised my interface and most of the speech bubbles changed into pale gray. Little gray speech bubbles. This is entirely possible because these companions of mine are able to intervene and connect to my mind directly. It's pretty much live editing similar to how TV channels add the banners and overlays for live sport events. On top of that, I now have the ability to transmit thoughts and dreams into any one person. I can project emotions, feelings, and ideas into them. These powers are strongest right here, in Freshka. Honestly, these sort of psychic attacks feel like a big step towards outright mind control. Am I becoming a hive mind that mind controls all the citizens in my valley? I am quite sure I've long passed the point where I can say this is too much power for one person to handle. I've had various powers that already qualify for that too much power thing. Like, subsidiary trees, and soul forge. Master. Patrick and the rest of my artificial minds were concerned. I think they detected my emotional state. Just having some thoughts about my new powers. I summoned a few individuals to the valley. It's the same place where the Valthorns, or the representatives, visited. This time, Jura and a few Valthorns escorted them, and I reduced the effects of my haunted forests along the path. Master Jura, did we do something wrong? One of the merchants asked as he walked carefully behind Jura. He was one of the few merchants who actively traded with us, and with my newfound powers, viewed me rather favorably. No. I responded to them telepathically. I tried to control the strength of my projection. Jura had recently said that my telepathic messages had become rather overwhelming, even though the messages were simple. I honestly had not considered how my telepathic communication scaled with my levels, even if it made all the sense in the world. Patrick's presence too, of course. It's actually a happy occasion. The 5 individuals were 2 merchants, a carpenter, a herbalist, and a healer. The 5 of you must feel like an odd bunch. The herbalist mustered all of his strength to respond. It is an honor. I could see his thoughts. He was worried sick, and he wondered what would happen to his family if he didn't go home today. The others were thinking how to run. The merchant's leg was wobbly. I had the Valthorns serve them some calming, relaxing tea. But I promise you'll return home today. The tea worked swiftly, and calmed their nerves. Then I got to the point. I've heard of your efforts to use local goods and promote local trade, and I am here to reward you. Trademaster, Eonic Master Carpenter, Advanced Eonic Herbalist, and Advanced Eonic Healer. Somehow Trademaster didn't have an Eonic variant, but then again, maybe that's because I myself have very little involvement in trade. But from what I understand, certain classes that do gain Eonic classes either gain some mastery over wood and growth, some variant of my healing powers, or anti-demonic properties. The 5 were stunned at the fruits, but they all took it. Except one merchant. It is a great honor, but I must refuse, Eon. The one who rejected said, and I saw the speech bubbles. He doesn't want to be seen as beholden to me, and I could tell he was extremely conflicted about it. My independence is something I greatly value as a merchant. My skill, trustworthy broker, relies on my continuous independence. I see. Oh well. But the other 4 were more than happy to take it. That is fine. It is a gift, and you are permitted to refuse. Eventually they all left the valley, safely. It didn't take long for the effects of their upgraded classes to show up. Their works were more fine, stronger. I wanted to see what their presence would cause. The other nations who got wind of their new classes were quick to offer, but I had believed they had enough sense to refuse. At least, for a while. I suspect the trademaster may move to other towns. Jasmine commented a few weeks after that day. But the other 3 are still based in the Freshlands. I mentally sighed. I guessed that a trademaster must move around to maximize his returns. Setting up a trading base is nothing more than a step to profit. At this moment, I feel my ideas of a cultural victory seemed extremely far-fetched. I could definitely assist in forming and shaping a culture, but ultimately the culture of a place is formed by its people, and built over decades and centuries. It's also constantly changing. The Freshlands is a newcomer in the world, culturally. There's no goodwill that's built up over the decades, unlike the temples that are cultural and political institutions. I've managed to sway a lot of the local nobles to at least give lip service, a word of faith and loyalty to the Freshlands. But many of them conflate the faith and the authority together. I am both god and emperor, a religious and an administrative authority. The temples are a religious figure, even if they lack administrative clout. The temples are gathering their forces. There are already kings who opposed the crusade, not because of the cause, but because they are too weak. My victory had scared many of them. Certainly, I was not the easy prey they believed I were. On the central continent, most of them view me quite favorably, and so, one of the projects I had this year was to cut a path across the Rotted Lands. Right now, if we take the Rotted Lands as a one big pizza, I've taken a large slice out. Same for the remnants of Harris Empire. What I want to do now is to cut across, and make a highway to the surviving kingdoms on the other side. After analyzing the maps, I decided to do it the politician and capitalist's way. To the highest bidder. We're going to launch a bid. I told Kavio and the council. I intend to use my powers to clear a pathway through and across the rotted lands, and so, I want to invite the kingdoms who are interested in an alliance with me to participate. This means a trade route, protected by my trees and beetles. We can also set up new towns and cities along the path. A new Silk Road, a new Tree Road, a Country Road. The entire representative council was excited by what that meant. A pathway that crossed the rotted lands would open up so many new economic opportunities for trade. It could massively reinvigorate the inland nations that bordered the rotted lands. So, invite the kingdoms to bid what they are willing to offer for a connecting path. We're also willing to offer a conditional defensive pact, should a nation feel ever threatened by their neighbors. Is this capitalism? No. This is just me sending my roots to wherever that's juicy. We'll open multiple paths eventually. This task will involve me cutting across where the demon's corruption is densest, but lately, I am feeling confident. I think it's partly because of Patrick. These titans, they generate massive amounts of mana, and his psychic powers meant that he could help to offset the corrupting influence. I can now dream of the transcontinental treeway. The announcement was met with chaos. Even more than I had expected. Does this mean Eon is able to extend his reach as far as the entire continent? That was pretty much the number one political and military question on everyone's mind. Because if that answer was a yes, they had to quickly revise my ability to project power anywhere on the continent. Clearly the answer is a yes. Why else would the Freshlands put out an auction for a safe pathway across the rotted lands? They must be able to do it. No country on the continent is safe if this is true. If the Freshlands beetles are able to pop up on the other side of the continent, are we not sharing this continent with a monster? How is our throne and kingdom safe? I think you mean, how are we still supporting the temples? This declaration is clearly a thinly veiled invitation to the rest of the kingdoms to switch sides. The temples were quick to attack the plan as some kind of tree imperialism. That this was me building an empire. Well, yes, of course. I am fighting temples who can summon armies from all the continents. Surely I am going to retaliate by expanding to such a point that I can force a stalemate and a peace treaty. The FFA was extremely busy after the bid went out. Many kingdoms, previously uninvolved in the affairs of the Freshlands, now had this offer. They've previously ignored me simply because I was on the other side. The rotted lands was this thick impenetrable wasteland. As a potential neighbor, everyone wanted to do their own due diligence on what they were potentially inviting to their corner. Some of the kingdoms quickly formed a coalition agreeing not to bid, and to convince others not to bid. Well, they don't want me next door. But I just need someone to agree. A kingdom desperate enough to agree. A kingdom that's been harassed, ignored and bullied. One who's willing to accept a new benefactor and patron. The temples were suddenly willing to open their purses and give aid to the border kingdoms, just to dissuade them from participating. Ah, geopolitics. Was it this chaotic when the Panama Canals or the Suez Canals opened? Surely the politics of having to skip a long detour for trade made everyone jump. While the discussion went on, and the actual auction would happen 1 year later, I started to expand. I have so many subsidiary trees. I pushed deeper into the Rotedlands. Skill. Hybrid botany upgraded. I pushed deeper to the center. Where is the demolite? The center should naturally be where the Demon King fell. There should be demolite. Instead I found a crater. A massive smoldering crater. What in the world? Oh. Is this because Harris and gang destroyed whatever that was trapping the souls of the heroes? The air here was different. The energies were chaotic. I wondered whether this constituted a magical ley line. Spaizzzer, take me home. Country road, to a place where I belong. West Bohemia, Mountain Mama. Take me home, country road.